What if a man could walk with God and see realms beyond our imagination? Imagine a life so intertwined with the divine that every thought, every breath seems guided by a hand unseen yet profoundly present. This was the life of Enoch, a man whose name would quietly echo through the corridors of time, long before kingdoms rose or empires fell. Born into a world still young, yet already teetering on the edge of human frailty, Enoch was unlike any other. He moved through life with a serenity that made even the restless whisper in his presence, sensing a calm that seemed to emanate from a source far greater than the earth beneath his feet. Enoch descended from the line of Seth, carrying within him a heritage that blended the innocence of creation with a sense of responsibility beyond his years. Even as a boy, he noticed the patterns of life, the way the rivers traced their courses through valleys, how the stars embroidered the night sky with their steady, silent light. Where others rushed, he lingered. Where others spoke to be heard, he listened, often pausing to consider the gentle murmur of the world around him. His purity was not the kind of innocence that shied away from the knowledge of good and evil, but a quiet awareness of life's truths, a recognition that to walk rightly was to align oneself with the pulse of the unseen. In his village, people would sometimes speak of Enoch as if he were touched by something divine, though no one could say exactly what it was. He did not seek attention, nor did he flaunt his closeness to God. Instead, it was apparent in the small, careful gestures, the way he helped without expectation, the way he held his eyes steady when the world seemed to waver, and the way his heart seemed to open to the cries and joys of all living things. There was a rhythm to his life, a slow, deliberate cadence that seemed to hum along with creation itself. And those who observed him often felt a quiet settling in their own hearts, as if they had glimpsed something holy in the ordinary. As Enoch grew, so did his understanding of the invisible threads that wove the cosmos together. He learned to recognize the subtle guidance that came not as a voice, but as a gentle urging, a direction that felt as natural as the sun's rise and as inevitable as the evening star. Nights were often spent beneath the canopy of stars, where he would lie on soft earth and trace the constellations with his eyes, feeling the vastness of the heavens press upon him in a way that was both humbling and comforting. He sensed that every twinkle held a story, every orbit a secret, and every silence a message meant only for those willing to wait and watch. There was also a longing within Enoch, a quiet yearning that he did not fully understand, a pull towards something beyond the ordinary limits of the human world. It was not impatience, but a patient curiosity, a willingness to open himself to experiences that others might not even imagine. Sometimes he would wander to the edges of forests, to cliffs overlooking rivers, or to the quiet meadows where the wind spoke without words. In these moments, he felt as though the veil between his world and another was thinner, and though he did not yet see the shapes beyond, he could sense them, waiting. It was a gentle anticipation, not frightening, but filled with the kind of awe that makes one hold their breath even in the midst of daylight. Those who encountered Enoch often remarked on the peace that seemed to accompany him. It was not the loud proclamation of holiness that demands attention, but a quiet, deep-seated calm that seemed to ripple outward. He walked among the people, yet he was not fully of them. His presence suggested that he belonged to a larger order, one that stretched beyond the hills and valleys of his earthly home. Even the youngest children, who might ordinarily be distracted by play or curiosity, would find themselves still and watchful, drawn to the gentle gravity that surrounded him. In his eyes, there was a reflection of something eternal, a knowing that the mundane and the divine could coexist in the same heartbeat. And so, life moved in its ordinary rhythms. But for Enoch, each day was a preparation, a quiet stepping into a destiny he had yet to see fully. He did not ask for visions or seek the mysteries of the heavens, yet there was a sense that he was ready, that the world was quietly arranging itself for a moment when the ordinary would touch the extraordinary. Nights were spent in contemplation and days in thoughtful action, each step imbued with an unspoken purpose. Though no trumpet sounded, no fanfare announced his path, the air seemed to thrum softly with the promise of things unseen. As the seasons shifted and Enoch moved from boyhood into the strength of manhood, a subtle change began to unfold within him. A stillness that had always been part of his nature deepened, as if some inner chamber of his heart was opening wider with every quiet reflection. He began to perceive patterns in the world that had previously escaped him. The way rivers curved as if bowing to some unseen design, the precision with which stars flitted across the night sky, and the gentle, almost imperceptible movements of the wind that seemed to carry whispers from beyond the earth. There was a send. See that the universe was a vast, living canvas, and though he was only one among many, he could feel its brushstrokes reaching toward him, inviting him to witness what lay beyond the horizon of ordinary vision. And so the story of Enoch begins, not with noise or grandeur, but with quiet awareness. A man walking steadily through the world, attuned to the delicate harmonies of life, sensing a presence just beyond sight, and carrying within him a purity that made him ready for what was to come. The day would soon arrive when Enoch's calm would meet the extraordinary, when the unseen realms would open to him, and when a man who had walked humbly among people would step softly into the wonders of heaven itself. For now, though, he remained a figure of serene contemplation, the world around him alive with the gentle promise of what was yet to be revealed. As Enoch walked under the wide sky full of stars, a calm stillness seemed to settle around him, as if the world were holding its breath in quiet anticipation. He felt a soft pull, like the whisper of a breeze that was too soft to hear, pulling him up to a place that sparkled just out of sight. It wasn't sudden or shocking. It was a calm, inevitable rise, as if the ground beneath his feet had become lighter. He walked slowly, and each step made a soft sound in the vast silence that seemed to hold him. As he did, the normal landscape of valleys, rivers, and trees faded away, and he was surrounded by a light that was neither sun nor fire, but a glowing presence that spread peace in every direction. The first heaven opened up to him like a dream made of the softest strands of dawn. Angels moved through the space with grace. Their shapes were soft but bright, and their faces were calm and full of a kind of quiet knowing that spoke without words. They didn't rush him or hurry him. They were there to support him in a calm, steady way, as if they had always been waiting for him to come. Their wings, which were huge and delicate, sparkled in the light of the stars. Every time they moved, they sent ripples of light across the air, giving everything a calm glow. Enoch's chest swelled with awe, not the kind of awe that comes from being scared, but the kind that comes from knowing he is in a holy place. He walked slowly, taking in every little thing about this lower heaven. The light moved slowly, making soft arcs that curved across the room like streams of gold. Stars, which were smaller than the ones he had seen on Earth at night, floated like quiet embers in the air, giving off a soft light that made the whole world seem alive and tender. He saw how the angels moved among the stars, taking care of them as if each one had its own life and purpose. He realized that even here, every movement had meaning, but nothing felt rushed or strained. It had a rhythm that was subtle and perfect, and Enoch's heart beat in time with it without him even thinking about it, as if he had always known this cadence. As he looked, he noticed other beings whose light was softer, like the light of dawn on a foggy morning. Even though they didn't say anything, he could tell they were paying attention to him. There was no judgment or heavy scrutiny in it, just a warm welcome that made him feel seen in a way that earthly eyes could never do. He started to walk toward a group of angels whose light was warmer. As he got closer, he heard a soft music coming from them. It wasn't a sound that he could hear. It was a vibration that gently resonated through him, filling every part of him with a calm joy. Enoch's eyes stayed on the heavenly shapes that floated above and around him. Some looked like fragile crystal structures, and their surfaces caught and scattered the soft glow, making patterns that changed slowly and endlessly, like the movement of a tide made of light. Others looked like huge tapestries of color, with threads of shimmering brilliance woven into them. They seemed alive, breathing in time with the angels' subtle movements. He understood that this heaven was not a static place. It was alive, with a soft pulse that reminded him of the divine order that ran through even the smallest details. He felt a gentle, almost meditative wonder, and he noticed that his body felt lighter, as if the weight of worldly worries had been lifted, leaving only the quiet presence of being. He saw a circle of angels in the distance. Their wings made arches that glowed softly like the moon. They moved in sync, directing the smaller lights and stars. Each movement was purposeful but smooth, as if they were conducting an orchestra that only the heart could hear. Enoch felt drawn to them by a calm and respectful curiosity. The light around him seemed to get deeper as he got closer, settling into a warmth that gently wrapped around his arms and shoulders. He didn't feel like he was intruding. Instead, it felt like his soul had always been a part of this place, and now he could finally see it all. Every movement was accompanied by a sense of stillness, and the silence was so deep that even the tiniest changes in the air or the softest light seemed to make them louder. He saw that there were threads connecting every star, angel, and floating light. These threads made a network of harmony and balance. The angels moved in a way that was so subtle that it was as if they were responding to even the smallest changes in the flow of energy through this network. They made sure that nothing was disturbed. Enoch's thoughts slowed down and became one with the rhythm of this lower heaven. Each breath he took and let out was in time with the pulse of the place. It was so calm that it felt like time had stopped, leaving him in a moment that was both endless and personal. Enoch also saw the smallest things in this peaceful place. The soft shine of light bouncing off a floating crystal, the delicate glimmer on an angel's feathers, and the quiet dance of tiny sparks that drifted slowly among the stars. Nothing was forced or sudden. Everything was in a gentle balance, and even the smallest movements were beautiful enough to catch his full attention. He understood that in this paradise, nothing was rushed, nothing was asked of him, and yet everything did what it was supposed to do without any effort. The calm that surrounded him wasn't just outside. It got into his bones and the quiet parts of his mind, filling him with a gentle sense that he was exactly where he needed to be. As Enoch walked farther and looked and listened, time seemed to lose its meaning. It felt like he was both separate from the world and deeply connected to it, as if the unseen threads of creation stretched from this lower heaven to every corner of the earth below. Every angel he passed acknowledged him with a quiet nod or a small gesture. It was a natural and warm recognition, never formal or distant. He felt that this world, even though it was beyond human understanding, wasn't meant to scare or overwhelm him. Instead, it was meant to awaken a sense of calm wonder, a quiet joy that resonated without noise or display. As he went on, Enoch's heart didn't swell with excitement. It swelled with awe that wrapped around his spirit like a soft blanket. Every turn showed him new patterns of light, new groups of angels and stars, all of which made him want to pay attention, stay there, and just be. He felt the extraordinary but peaceful truth of this lower heaven, how the divine could exist in stillness, how majesty could be gentle, and how a soul that was in tune with such harmony could find a calm that was beyond all earthly understanding. Enoch understood the beauty of watching, the peace of being, and the quiet power of a place where heaven itself breathed in time with the heart of someone who walked humbly but knowingly beneath its bright light. As Enoch floated deeper into the soft light of the lower heaven, he saw a group of beings whose presence gave off a quiet sense of power. These were the Watchers, angels whose job it was to watch over and guide people. The Watchers were different from the heavenly forms he had seen before, which moved slowly and seemed to have no trouble doing so. The Watchers, on the other hand, had a sense of duty that weighed on them, as if the tasks they did were huge but never rushed. Each one had a soft, inner light that seemed to pulse in time with the rhythm of the heavens. This calm brilliance showed both their wisdom and their watchful nature. Enoch felt a deep respect for these people because they weren't just watching from afar. They were guardians whose presence affected the delicate balance between the divine and the earthly. The Watchers moved with a grace that seemed to be planned by the very fabric of creation. Their wings were wide and softly glowing, and they moved in ways that made the air move in patterns that made small waves of light, like ripples on a still pond. Some of them had instruments that Enoch could barely make out. They were small tools for guidance or measurement, and their purposes were hidden but very important. Others just hovered, their eyes focused on the patterns of human life below without wavering. Even though they paid a lot of attention, it was never harsh or unkind. It was the attention of someone who knows how fragile the people they are watching are and wants to help them, not control them. The calmness around them was deep, as if the air itself had softened when they were there. Enoch saw beauty in the smallest things, like how the soft glow of their wings reflected on the faint clouds of light floating through this heaven, how each angel's posture seemed to show a gentle dignity, and how the subtle harmonies in their movements made every action feel both planned and easy. He got it without saying a word, that their duties weren't things to do but roles to play. They were guardians of the invisible threads that linked the heavens to the earth. Their guidance went to places that people couldn't see, making sure that life followed patterns that people couldn't yet see. He stayed close to one Watcher in particular. Her wings sparkled with faint shades of silver and pale gold, and her gaze was patient and deep, as if it could see both eternity and the smallest details of a mortal life. Enoch felt a soft, not sharp, sense of awe, as if this being's quiet understanding reached into the deepest parts of his own heart. The angel moved with great care, changing the position of a small group of lights that stood for human thoughts and actions. Enoch realized that even the smallest change in this heavenly realm could have an effect on the world below. The Watcher felt the weight of this duty, but he carried it with calmness, as if careful attention, not force, could keep the harmony of creation itself. Enoch noticed small differences among the Watchers, as if some of them had heavier burdens than others. Their faces were calm and glowing, showing that they had endless patience. But in a few eyes, he saw a flicker that hinted at curiosity, stronger than obedience, and a softness of desire that didn't quite fit with their serious purpose. It was hard to see, just a shadow under the light of their duty, but it made Enoch feel uneasy. Even in this lower heaven, which was perfect in every way, there were signs of tension and whispers of choices that could lead people away from the balance they were supposed to keep. He didn't fully understand it yet, but the feeling stayed with him, quiet and strong, as if the Watchers themselves held the seeds of a future that would be both amazing and scary. The Watchers had huge and delicate jobs. Some guided the movements of stars and other heavenly bodies to make sure that the seasons and cycles on Earth were in line with divine order. Others watched what people did and said, whispering advice or subtle influence when people didn't understand something. Enoch understood that their job was never to give orders or punish people, but to gently correct them and keep a rhythm that kept both heaven and earth going. Their beauty came not only from their glowing forms, but also from the care and patience with which they did these tasks. Every movement they made was a quiet testament to the unseen architecture of creation. Enoch started to understand how big the Watcher's job was as he kept watching. They were like bridges between worlds, moving so gently that they could have been mistaken for natural flow. But beneath the calm surface, there was a quiet complexity that made it seem like the angel's choices, big or small, could have effects that no human could measure. He felt the weakness that lay beneath their strength, a reminder that even beings of light could be tempted or challenged, and that the balance they kept needed constant attention, humility, and an inner vigilance that was like the divine's own watchfulness. Enoch let himself stay in the soft light of this lower heaven, taking in the calmness and order that surrounded him. There was a gentle but steady rhythm here that reminded me that life, both heavenly and earthly, happened in patterns that were connected. Even though he was amazed by how well the watchers worked together, the flicker of curiosity and the soft whispers of desire in a few of their eyes made him think that the harmony was fragile and that choices were waiting, subtle and important, beneath the surface of beauty and duty. The thought didn't bother him too much. It just made him think more deeply about things. It was a soft hint of things to come. A quiet realization that the story of heaven and earth was more complicated than he could understand at the time. And so Enoch stayed in that bright place, surrounded by beings whose duty and grace seemed to be a part of who they were. He felt the calm of the heavens wash over him, but he also saw the faint, almost imperceptible signs of imperfection, like a shadow on water that bends the reflection without breaking it. He knew in a deep and gentle way that even those who were closest to God had choices and duties that could change the way things worked in the worlds below. The Watchers were beautiful and powerful, both in their form and their purpose. Enoch stood quietly among them, feeling both the awe of being there and the quiet, soft stirrings of anticipation for what lay beyond the perfection of this first heavenly encounter. The mixing of heaven and earth made children that had never been seen on earth before. The Watchers and the daughters of men had children who were huge and strong, like mountains rising from the plain. They were much bigger than their human relatives. People called them the Nephilim, and they were giants whose very presence changed the world's rhythm. At first, they looked like wonders to people, living legends with great power who could do things that no ordinary person could even think of. Their voices could be heard far away in the valleys. Their steps could cover a lot of ground, and their strength could bend trees and stones like they were weak reeds. But there was a shadow behind the wonder, because their existence had effects that the earth itself seemed to have trouble handling. The Nephilim grew quickly, both in size and in hunger. Their hunger was huge, a constant need that regular food couldn't satisfy. At first, they ate the fruits of the land and the herds of men, which were more than any one household could provide. But as their hunger grew, the fields and flocks they had weren't enough to feed them anymore. Villages that used to welcome their protection began to shake when they got close, because what they wanted could take everything a family had in a single day. The ground seemed to be straining under their heavy steps, as if the earth itself was telling them that they shouldn't stay there for long. But there was something strangely grand about them. Their eyes were fierce, but they also had a hint of the heavenly light that their fathers had come from. Their huge, broad bodies had a grace that was otherworldly even in their strength. They were both scary and beautiful, showing how fragile life on earth is and how bright heaven is. Men told stories about their deeds, like how the Nephilim could scatter armies with their strength, tear down walls with their hands, and cross rivers in a single step. People sang songs about their power, but those songs made them uneasy because they knew that power without humility is dangerous. Enoch saw them in a vision and felt the sadness behind their beauty. He saw that the Watchers' decisions had given these beings both light and shadow, which made them powerful but also made them restless. They didn't quite fit in with the other people, and they couldn't go back to the heights of heaven. They were stuck between worlds, and their very existence was a sign of imbalance. They were the strongest, but they also had the strongest desire, because nothing could truly satisfy them. They often used violence to get what they wanted, taking by force what the earth would not give them freely. Not only animals, but also people shed blood, and the cries of the earth rose up, carried by the winds like sad prayers. The Nephilim changed the way people lived their lives. Families hid their harvests by making secret places under the ground to store grain. They were afraid of the sound of giant footsteps coming. Shepherds took their flocks to secret valleys, hoping the Nephilim wouldn't find them. Fear spread slowly but surely. It wasn't always spoken out loud, but it was felt in the way people's hands shook and the way they looked at each other quickly when they were near these powerful beings. Communities were no longer at ease because the wars had changed. What had once been a heavenly gift of guidance now weighed heavily on men's hearts, making them tired and uneasy. But the giants weren't completely mean. Some had a spark of kindness inside them, a faint memory of the heavenly order they had come from. At times, they acted as guards, keeping wild animals and rival groups out of villages. Their huge presence could make people feel safe or scared just as easily. But this kindness didn't last long, because their hunger and restlessness often turned even their best intentions into disaster. What started as a defense could end in destruction because their hands were too heavy and broke what they were trying to protect. Their lives were full of contradictions, gifts of strength that made them feel both happy and sad, light and dark that were so close together that they were hard to tell apart. The Nephilim had a bigger and bigger effect as they grew. The earth groaned under their weight, and its resources were taken away faster than they could be replaced. The blood from their hunts flowed into rivers, and fields that had once been full of life were now empty. Men began to cry out, not just out of fear, but also out of desperation, because they saw that the world was becoming unbalanced. The voices of the people rose up and joined the earth's sadness in a chorus of mourning that reached the heavens. Enoch felt like the story was going to happen no matter what as he watched the visions unfold. The giants were beautiful, but they were not a blessing. They were a sign of evil made flesh. They were reminders of decisions that had gone wrong and lines that had been crossed that should have stayed sacred. Their tall shapes were both monuments and warnings, monuments to the mixing of heaven and earth and warnings of the sadness that comes from that mixing. He felt the calm sadness of someone who sees a storm coming and knows that once the winds start to blow, it can't be stopped. But in the quiet of his vision, Enoch also felt the Creator's patience as he watched and waited. People heard the cries of the earth and the burdens of mankind. The Nephilim were powerful and beautiful, but their story was just one part of a bigger story that would end with judgment and renewal. For now, Enoch's eyes were drawn to their tall bodies, their voices echoing across the land, and their insatiable hunger that devoured everything in its path. He could see them clearly, giants born from a union that was never meant to be, beings who carried the seeds of their own destruction in their greatness. He had lived quietly among his people, known for his purity and deep devotion, when the time came that would change everything for him. The air around him seemed to get thicker with meaning, and there was a stillness that wasn't of this world, as if unseen voices were whispering his name in tones of eternal authority. Enoch then understood that he had been chosen for a task that no other person had ever been asked to do. His heart beat heavily in his chest, not because he was afraid of the unknown, but because he realized that God had given him words that would last forever. He felt the weight of eternity on his shoulders, soft but unyielding, urging him to rise above the everyday rhythms of life and take on a mission that would reach heaven itself. When the sun went down and the light faded, Enoch often walked in the quiet of the evening. The earth became a soft canvas of shadow and glow. He felt a presence around him that made him feel warm, like the steady glow of an eternal flame, not like fire that burns. A voice, bigger than thunder but softer than a whisper, went deep into his soul. He was told that he would carry messages for his people and for all the generations that would come after them. These words were more than just instructions. They were warnings, Prummy says, visions and revelations that would show people things they didn't know about angels, men, and the story of creation as it was happening. Enoch knew that his life would never again be his own. It was now tied to a mission that went from the earth to the very halls of heaven. The idea of carrying those words made him feel like he was in two different places at once. He felt very small in the grand scheme of things, which made him feel very humble. On the other hand, he felt stronger, as if divine hands had lifted his heart, making it able to hold what seemed impossible to hold. He thought back to when he was young and wanted to know more about the unseen mysteries of God with a pure heart. Now, that desire was met with a very important job. He knew that every word he said would not fade away like the breath of regular speech. Angels would remember them, pass them down through the ages, and keep them as proof. After that meeting, the nights changed. Enoch often lay awake while others slept, staring at the stars above him. The stars twinkled like quiet messengers, reminding him of the many angelic eyes that watched over both heaven and earth. There were times when he could feel their presence near him, even though he couldn't see them. It was as if they were waiting for him to finish the job he had been given. He would whisper into the dark, not because he was unsure, but because he wanted to be sure. And he always felt the same answer in his heart: I am with you. When the load got too heavy for him to bear, those words became his anchor. When he was called to speak to his people, Enoch's voice carried a new tone, gentle but firm, calm yet unshakable. His neighbors, who used to think of him as a quiet man of faith, now looked up to him and thought that his words came from a place far beyond the human mind. He didn't speak in a way that made him sound arrogant or like he was trying to take over. Instead, his words fell like steady rain, refreshing, nourishing, and sometimes scary. He talked about the heavenly realms, the angels who served there, the watchers who used to guide but now falter, and the dangers that came about because of decisions made far above the earth. His listeners felt both comfort and unease because they knew he had told them the truth, and the truth always asked something of those who heard it. Enoch sometimes had a hard time with how lonely his job was. Who could understand the dreams that kept him up at night, or the heavy words that were on his heart? People listened when he tried to explain, but they could never fully understand what he had seen and heard. But he never felt alone. Heaven itself walked beside him, even though the people around him couldn't fully understand his pain. He felt it in the stillness of the wind, the light shining on the hills, and the quiet knowledge that the one who had chosen him saw every step he took. Sometimes Enoch missed the simple days before his calling, when his life was full of the everyday beauty of family, fields, and friends. But even in those memories, he knew he was ready for this. Every secret prayer, every silent walk, and every moment of longing for God had prepared him for this task. He knew that everything in his life had led up to this moment, and that nothing had been wasted. Even though he was weak and small, it helped him remember that the power didn't come from him, but from the one who gave him the words to say. The visions kept coming to him, sometimes softly and sometimes with a lot of force. He saw the order of heaven, the brilliance of angels, the corruption that was about to spread, and the judgment that would one day make everything right. Each vision was not just something to look at. It was also a message to be shared. He always felt the weight of his responsibilities, but he also always felt that heaven was with him. He learned to keep both the seriousness of the mission and the peace of being with God in his heart. His face was soft back then, and he was calm because he was always aware of God's presence. People who looked at him could smell something heavenly about him, as if he carried a light that came from eternity and not the sun. Even though his job was hard, he stayed calm because he knew he wasn't alone. Enoch's job wasn't just to speak. It was also to show how close God and man are by showing that a human heart could walk in step with the divine. He moved forward, step by step, carrying the weight of heaven's message with a heart that was both heavy and light. He knew that his mission was not just for his time, but for all time to come. His life became the bridge between heaven and earth, a vessel through which eternal words would flow. The story of his calling began to unfold in the quiet rhythm of his days, as gentle as the wind and as steady as the stars above. The sky above Enoch looked like a huge ocean of light, with layers that his earthly eyes had never seen before. When he first rose to the lower realms, it felt like he had entered a world made of both silence and song, a harmony that could not be put into words on earth. The stars looked like they were alive. They didn't just move around randomly. They moved in a careful rhythm, as if an unseen hand were guiding them along their path. Their brilliance didn't just light up the room, it pulsed with purpose, creating a glow that spoke of order, law, and divine intention. The lower heavens weren't chaotic skies. They were a carefully measured place, full of patterns that were too deep for people to understand. When Enoch's eyes got used to the light, he could see that what looked like distant points of light from Earth were actually huge, beautiful bodies of light. The colors of each star changed like streams of fire: gold, sapphire, crimson, and white. They didn't wander around aimlessly or lose their brightness. Instead, they kept time and moved in time with the great rhythm that governed the universe. It was like the stars were instruments in a huge symphony, each one adding its own sound to the music of creation that never ends. The beauty was overwhelming, but it also brought a sense of peace because there was no rush or doubt, just the calm unfolding of heavenly order. The angels moved among the stars, where they were in charge of the cosmic dance and kept it safe. Some stood still, glowing like pillars of light, and watched closely as the spheres moved along their paths. Some people traveled smoothly from star to star, directing their light and making sure their paths stayed clear. Their shapes glowed with a translucent light, sometimes looking like flames, and other times like people in white clothes that sparkled like crystal. They didn't carry any weapons of war or act sternly. Instead, they walked with quiet dignity, reminding everyone that even the stars needed someone to take care of them. Their faces looked both young and old, and they looked calm because they knew they had been doing their jobs since the beginning of time. Enoch understood that every angel had a job that was tied to the rhythm of the heavens. Some controlled the movement of constellations, making sure that the seasons on earth below followed a natural order. Others took care of the stars' brightness, making sure their light stayed pure so that it wouldn't fade or dim before its time. Others kept an eye on the movements of the wandering lights, the sun, the moon, and the planets, and guided them wabu-jasan with unseen hands so that their journeys would stay steady and unbroken. These beings didn't have to work hard. They did their jobs with the ease of people who were in perfect harmony with God's will. Their work was worship, and their worship was work, and it never stopped. There were no dark places in this world, but shadows sometimes passed by like soft veils, reminding Enoch of the balance that kept everything in harmony. In the lower heavens, light was the language. It wasn't harsh or blinding. It was soft, layered, and never-ending. He could tell that the stars were brighter than the angels, as if one was the song and the other were the singers who sang it. Here, time didn't move the same way it did on Earth. There were no cycles of day and night, but there was a rhythm, a pulse, as if the whole sky was breathing in and out with calm. As Enoch looked more closely, he realized that the stars were not just lights. They were also containers of secrets. Some were like storage rooms for fire, holding energy that would later come down to warm the ground. Others looked like they were full of rain and dew, and their brightness made it possible for the waters to be poured on the land below. Some of them carried secrets about the signs and seasons, and their patterns looked like a scroll written across the sky for those who could read it. The angels who cared for them knew what they meant, but Enoch could only guess at their meanings, feeling that these secrets were too big for him to understand. The movements of the heavens were not silent. Enoch could feel it in his soul, even though no one on earth could hear it. The stars sang. Their light had a sound that shook him to his core. It wasn't music like men make. It was a harmony that went beyond melody and a vibration that brought peace to the air. The angels moved to the beat of this song, their steps like streams that flow, owed with the sound. Stars and guardians sang an unbroken chorus of praise, raising their order and beauty as proof of the Creator's greatness. Enoch walked more, but it wasn't really walking because his movements were light and easy, as if he were floating on waves of invisible air. He looked at constellations he had seen from Earth, but they looked alive here, with clearer shapes and stories. He understood that the shapes men made in the sky were not just figments of their imagination, but rather weak echoes of truths that had been known for a long time. It seemed like the angels were smiling at his amazement, as if they were inviting him to see that the heavens were both a map and a message meant to speak silently to the earth below. There was order, but it wasn't strict. The sky was free, but it was free in a way that was guided by perfect law. The stars and angels both enjoyed doing their jobs and didn't try to change their paths. Enoch thought there was a lesson in this harmony, that true peace comes not from fighting against God's will, but from going with it. The heavens didn't have to work hard to shine. It was their nature to do so, and God wanted them to do so. The longer he stayed, the more he felt the stillness sink into him. The awe didn't scare him. Instead, it settled into his spirit like a calm river. He understood why men on earth looked to the stars for help. Their steady brightness showed how faithful God was. But he also knew that what men saw was only the surface. An angel was watching over each light, doing their duty with love to make sure that the order of heaven affected the order of earth. Enoch understood that these lower heavens were a bridge, a place where the eternal met the visible, and the secrets of creation were revealed in soft layers. He couldn't see the higher realms yet, but he could feel them above him, like secret rooms waiting for him to rise. For now, it was enough to look at the lower heavens and drink in their beauty while remembering how peaceful they were. The stars moved, the angels glowed, and everything in the universe seemed to be in perfect harmony, as if the very fabric of existence was whispering to him that everything is held, ordered, and sustained. Enoch felt a change in the air when he was taken beyond the lower heavens. The stars were still bright around him, but the air became thicker and heavier, though not heavy in a bad way. It was a feeling of deep respect. Here was the middle heavens, a place where the great bodies of light that made time flow showed themselves in all their glory. From a distance, the sun, moon, and wandering stars didn't look like tiny dots. They looked like huge, living things, each moving with a power that was both awe-inspiring and calming. The sun shone like a big ball of golden fire, and its warmth was not too hot, but life-giving. It seemed to comfort Enoch's soul. It wasn't a fire of destruction, it was a steady stream of blessings that the Creator had set limits on. Enoch could see the paths laid out for it, big glowing arches that stretched across the sky. The sun followed these paths without fail, never straying or faltering. Its obedience to God's command made sure that the earth below would have its days and seasons. He knew that this faithfulness wasn't an accident. The angels in charge of the sun made sure that it rose and set at the right times and that its journey was never broken. The moon moved next to the sun, soft and silver, reflecting a softer light that made the sky peaceful. Enoch saw that the moon's light didn't come from inside it, but it was beautiful, as if it enjoyed receiving and reflecting light. Its phases changed in perfect rhythm, growing and shrinking with delicate precision, marking the passage of weeks and months. There was no competition between the sun and moon. Instead, they were in harmony. One gave strength and the other gave gentleness, and together they made sure that everything was in balance. The angels that watched over the moon seemed to be quieter and moved more slowly, their wings like pearl veils floating across its surface. Their vigilance made sure that the timing was perfect and that the nights on earth would not be lost to darkness, but would instead glow with borrowed light. As Enoch looked farther, he saw the stars in the middle heavens. These moved freely along wider paths, unlike those in the lower realm that seemed to be stuck in their patterns. Some were called wandering stars, but even their travels were governed by rules. Their paths crossed, curved, and circled in the sky with amazing accuracy, like threads in a tapestry. They shone in deep sapphire, bronze, and crystal colors, and moved across the sky like they were writing a language that was too big for people to understand. He understood that these lights were signs meant to tell people who wanted to know about the story of creation as it was happening. The middle heavens weren't quiet. A deep hum seemed to echo throughout the realm, and it moved through Enoch's bones. It was the voice of order itself, a soundless declaration that everything was in balance. The sun moved in this rhythm, as did the moon and the stars. It wasn't rushed or put off. It just was, always there. The angels who lived here moved like the hands of a huge clock, making sure that everything stayed in its right place and that every season on earth came at the right time. Enoch was shown the secrets of the seasons. He saw rooms of light where the sun came in at certain times. Each door opened to let warmth out into the world below. These rooms showed the seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter, each one opening up like the turning of a big page. The angels who stood at these gates were tall and glowing, and their eyes were steady and unblinking. They stood guard at the doors with devotion, making sure that the sun came and went as God wanted. Enoch could tell that their watchfulness was not just for the earth, but for the harmony of the whole universe. If even one gate were broken, the balance of all creation could be thrown off. The moon also had its own secret places, where its light was measured and divided. He saw that it got its brightness from the sun and carried it like a ship, letting it out slowly through its phases. The angels were very careful when they let this go, like pouring water, drop by drop, to make sure that each night had the right amount of light. Enoch was amazed by how accurate they were, because even the smallest delay or extra would change the flow of time below. The moon's obedience to this order showed humility because it didn't shine on its own. It reflected what was given. This was a reminder that beauty often lies in giving up. The stars in the middle of the sky had their own secrets. Some held the treasures of rain, which would come down to the earth at the right time. Others held fire, not the destructive blaze that burned everything, but the warmth and energy that kept life going. Their paths were like threads on a loom, weaving together the story of how the world came to be. The angels who took care of them moved with solemn grace, changing their paths and making sure their light stayed bright. Enoch understood that these stars were more than just lights in the sky. They held secrets and were connected to the fate of the world. Not as fleeting moments, but as a huge river flowing steadily forward. Time itself seemed to unfold before him. The sun marked the days, the moon marked the months, and the stars guided the years. But in the middle heavens, time didn't seem to be moving quickly. It moved slowly and with confidence, as if the Creator held every moment in their hands. Enoch's heart slowed down to match the rhythm of the music, and his thoughts calmed down in the presence of such peace. It was peaceful to see how everything fit together. The sun didn't try to outshine the moon didn't want to be like the stars, and the stars didn't try to change their paths. Everyone was happy to do their part and help make things better. Enoch knew that this was the law of the heavens, a law that wasn't written down but was part of the very fabric of creation. It was the law of trust, obedience, and unbroken rhythm that made everyone who lived there feel safe. Enoch felt like he was being taught not with words but with visions as he drifted deeper into the middle heavens. Each scene taught him something new. The balance of light and dark, the harmony of strength and gentleness, and the flow of time all showed a wisdom that was beyond human understanding. It wasn't a harsh lesson. It was a gentle invitation to relax, because you knew that nothing was left to chance. The heavens did what they were told, and this kept the earth below safe. The stillness of this world wrapped around him like a cloak, pulling him deeper into its peace. He wanted to know the secrets of the higher heavens, but he stayed here, taking in the beauty of cosmic law. The sun kept shining, the moon let out its silver light, the stars made their huge patterns, and the angels watched over everything forever. He saw the Creator's faithfulness in their harmony. It was a quiet assurance that everything, big and small, was part of an order that would never change. Enoch was lifted up again, and this time he saw the earth not as a man walking on its soil, but as someone looking at it from the sky. What he saw hurt his soul because the beauty of creation, which had once been pure and whole, was now marred by shadows. The valleys and plains that should have been peaceful were full of trouble. People walked in ways that weren't meant for them and chased after things that took them off the Creator's path. Their hearts were restless, and they were busy with violence and lies. The streams that used to be clear were now dark with the weight of their sins, and the air felt heavy with sadness. Not only did people make the earth sick, but so did other things. The fallen one's power still had an effect, causing pride and rebellion. Men were taught things that were too heavy for their souls, secrets that should have stayed in the sky. This knowledge led to corruption because wisdom without purity could be used as a weapon. Enoch saw how their hearts were filled with pride, how their greed spread like a disease, and how the cries of the innocent rose like smoke, reaching even the heavens. The land was sad because of their sins, as if the dirt itself could feel the stain of what they did. Enoch saw symbols appear in front of him. He saw a big tree with wide branches. Its fruit used to be plentiful, but now it is rotting and bitter. Birds that used to nest in its shade flew away, leaving its branches bare. He knew that the tree was people, planted to grow in righteousness, but ruined by sin. The birds of heaven turned away because its fruit no longer gave life. Then, a fire came up from the center of the earth and burned the roots of this tree. But the fire wasn't out of control. It was controlled and measured, burning to clean instead of destroy. Enoch saw a small, glowing seed in the ashes, protected by hand. As that he couldn't see. This was the promise that hope would not be lost even in judgment. He was shown waters that used to be clear and brought life to fields and forests. Now they rushed in torrents, growing into floods that swept away everything in their path. The rivers got higher and higher, taking towns and plains with them and carrying away people's work. The vision was full of sadness, but it was also full of justice. The flood didn't happen because of cruelty. It happened because of mercy, to wash away the corruption that had become too much to bear. Enoch was sad about what had been lost and amazed by the Creator's determination to fix it. Another vision appeared to him, a huge bright scale hanging in the sky. On one side were the actions of men, full of greed, violence, and pride. On the other side was the command of rightness, which was light but strong. No matter how much corruption was added to the side, it could never be more powerful than the purity of God's law. The scale, on the other hand, made it clear how far people had gone astray. Enoch shook because he knew that judgment wasn't random. It was based on a standard that was always the same and never changed. He saw the ground shake as mountains broke apart and valleys rose. Cities fell apart not by chance, but as if the stones themselves were rejecting the sins that had been done to them. The sky got darker, and thunder sounded like voices warning people who hadn't listened. But there was still order in the shaking. The shaking wasn't meant to end everything. It was meant to wake up hearts and break the stone-like hardness that had grown around men's souls. The judgment was not just destruction, it was also a warning to turn back before the end. In the middle of these visions, Enoch saw the angels who punish people. They didn't move with anger or happiness. They moved with a sense of duty, their faces full of sadness. They did what heaven told them to do. They tied up those who had led, others astray and put them in dark places where their voices could no longer spread evil. The chains that held them were made of light, not by people, but by God. They were unbreakable and would last forever. Enoch felt justice mixed with mercy even here, because the fallen were held back not just to suffer, but also so that creation could breathe again. He was shown people who made fun of the warnings from heaven, and their laughter echoed in defiance. But their happiness was shallow, their eyes were empty, and their voices were hollow. Their laughter stopped when the floods came and the ground shook. Enoch's heart broke for them because he saw how blind they had been, holding on to shadows when light was given to them for free. The visions made him feel not only certain of judgment, but also sad about missed opportunities and choices made out of pride when gentler paths were open. In the middle of these dark pictures, there were signs of hope. He saw a small flame that stayed lit through the storm, never going out, and was protected by unseen hands. This flame was faith, which was quiet but strong, and it burned in the hearts of those who still sought the Creator. Even though the floodwaters were raging and the ground was shaking, this flame burned steadily, promising that goodness would never go away from the earth. He saw families praying in secret places, their prayers rising like threads of light and weaving together to make a protective canopy. These were the few who would survive and bring about restoration. Enoch felt both awe and heaviness in his spirit. He knew that the visions weren't meant to hurt him, but to get him ready to speak. The pictures of fire, flood, and shaking ground were lessons painted not with ink, but with light and shadow. They warned of the price of corruption and the fact that justice would always be served. But there was always the steady truth that mercy was there, and that the Creator's hand was never completely gone. Even when you were being judged, there was a way to start over. The stillness came back, and Enoch felt the heaviness of what he had seen settle on his heart. He could see the whole world with all its beauty and sadness. He had been shown how corrupt it was, the signs of its punishment, and the lessons that were meant for everyone who would listen. The visions pushed him to speak and deliver the message carefully, because they were not his words, but those of the one who had shown him things that were too hard for people to understand. He stood there in awe, knowing that his journey was only getting deeper and that more visions were coming, each with a truth too heavy to forget. The mountains were taller than anyone could have imagined, and their peaks were covered in a brilliant light that sparkled like crystal in the light of day. Enoch's eyes were drawn up to the 7 holy mountains of heaven. Each one was beautiful in its own way, but they all fit together to make the great fabric of divine order. These weren't just regular mountains made of stone and dirt. They were living glory mountains, shaped by the hand of the Eternal. The gemstones on their surfaces shone like they were breathing light, and the colors changed softly, making it seem like the mountains were alive. They stood like silent guards, their tall shapes marking the edges of worlds that people can't see. Each mountain had its own secret, its own presence, and its own guardians. These weren't just beautiful things, they were also holy and powerful places. The first mountain looked like a huge emerald, glowing with a deep, rich green that seemed to promise life forever. Enoch could feel its presence inside him, bringing back memories of the beginning of creation, when everything was new and not yet corrupted. Streams of crystal-clear water flowed around its base, reflecting the heavenly light like glass. Angels with bright, soft faces walked along its slopes, and their wings opened like lily petals. They protected this place with quiet strength because the mountain was a symbol of renewal and a reminder that God gives life. Enoch felt a peace so deep that it was almost too much to bear as he stood in front of it. It was as if the mountain itself held him in a calm that lasted forever. The second mountain rose next to it, its slopes glowing with sapphire light, and its slopes bathed in a cool, heavenly blue. It looked like it went on forever, like the deep ocean, but there was no fear in its depths. This mountain stood for knowledge and wisdom, and it was the base of the heavens. There were angels here who held scrolls of light that had truths written on them that pulsed like stars across the parchment. Their voices had a rhythm like rivers flowing, and they spoke words of wisdom to those who wanted to know the secrets of heaven. Enoch looked at them in awe, feeling that the mountain was a keeper of secrets that were too big for people to understand. He knew that the laws of the universe echoed here, not on stone, but on the fabric of creation itself. The third mountain glowed like a ruby, and its fiery light spread over its ridges, warming everything in sight without burning it. This was the mountain of devotion, where love burned like fire without smoke. The angels around it wore bright red clothes that looked like burning lamps that never went out. They raised their wings to the sky as if they were always praising God, and their harmonies echoed across the sky. Enoch stood still, and the fire in this place warmed his heart and filled him with a sense of awe that was too strong to put into words. He knew that this mountain stood for the burning love that all of creation has for its creator, an offering that never ends. The fourth mountain stood tall and gleaming, as if it had been carved from the purest light. Enoch could hardly look at it because its surface reflected the brightness of heaven so strongly. This was the mountain of purity, and angels with white clothes like snow guarded it. Their faces showed innocence, and their eyes showed the truth of holiness. This place was the home of divine perfection, so nothing impure could come near it. As Enoch got closer, he felt the weight of being human on him, but at the same time, he felt like he was being lifted by invisible hands, as if grace itself was carrying him. The mountain spoke of being clean, forgiving, and the pure presence of the eternal. It reminded me that only what is pure and clean can stand before the throne of God. The fifth mountain rose up in a brilliant gold color, and its peaks sparkled as if sunlight had been poured on them forever. It radiated majesty and authority, its slopes resembling a throne in the form of nature. The angels stood tall here, with crowns on their heads. Their faces were serious but full of divine justice. They watched over the mountain like it was the royal seat of a kingdom, because it was a place of power. Enoch felt its presence like the steady weight of a crown on his head, which reminded him of the responsibility and leadership that God gave to his creation. The mountain said that order and rule came from divine balance, not oppression. Authority came from doing the right thing. It was here that the voices of command rang out, making sure that the universe followed the will of heaven. The sixth mountain shone like crystal, clear but solid, and it sparkled with every color of light that came from within it. It looked like it could break easily, but it also looked strong. This mountain told the truth, made things clear, and showed them to me. The angels who protected it had silver trump, eats, and when they sang, the sound spread through the heavens like waves of light. This mountain revealed everything, so nothing could stay hidden around it. Enoch felt like his thoughts were out in the open, and every secret of his heart was revealed in its light. There was no fear, though, only the comfort of being fully known and held in God's arms. He remembered that truth was not meant to hurt, but to heal. The soul could only find freedom in the light of revelation. The seventh and last mountain towered over the others. It was so big and bright that it looked like it touched the edge of eternity. It was made of stone that no one had ever seen before. It shone like 1,000 suns, but never burned the eyes that looked at it. This was the mountain of eternity, where the secrets of time and timelessness came together. The angels here were different from the others. They were very tall, and their wings spread out like the horizon. They stood with their faces turned up to the highest heavens, as if they were always looking at the throne of the eternal. As Enoch looked at this mountain, his heart shook because he felt it was the closest place to where God lived. Every breath he took here felt like a step into forever, as if time itself had vanished into an eternal presence. Enoch felt like he was in the rhythm of these 7 mountains as he stood in front of them. Each mountain was like a note in a divine symphony. They made a melody that echoed through all of creation, a harmony of love, wisdom, purity, authority, truth, and eternity. This heavenly song was made up of angels, slopes, and shiny stones. The air was still and reverent, and Enoch's spirit was filled with awe. He knew that these mountains were more than just symbols or beautiful places. They were living proof of God's order. They were always there to show God's plan, like pillars that held up the heavens themselves. Even though Enoch was just a man, he was able to see them, feel their weight and glory, and keep their memory in his heart. Enoch's spirit rose higher and higher until he reached a point where words seemed too weak to describe what he saw. Like a scroll, the heavens opened up to show the Most High's home. The throne of God was in the middle of this strange place. It was huge and bright, and no light made by man could match its brilliance. It wasn't made of stone or wood, and it wasn't shaped by human hands. It was full of divine power, as if it had always been there and would always be there. There were streams of fire flowing beneath it, but they didn't burn anything. Instead, they lit up everything around them. The throne shone with glory, brighter than the sun and more dazzling than any jewel. It was as if the light coming from this seat of power was the source of all creation. There was a sea around the throne that looked like crystal and was as smooth as glass. It reflected the endless light and changed colors like living rainbows. The surface was calm but full of life, and it seemed to hold all the secrets in the world. The air was always still, except for the sound of wings and voices rising in praise. The throne looked like a mountain of fire and light, with sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds woven into its base. It looked like each gem had been lit from within. The pillars that surrounded it weren't just buildings. They were living flames, and angels of unimaginable beauty stood in awe, their forms glowing and never-ending. Enoch's eyes were drawn to the person sitting on the throne, and even though his mortal mind couldn't quite grasp it, he saw what words could barely describe. The Eternal One was dressed in light, which was brighter than lightning but softer than dawn. It was a light that showed everything and hid everything at the same time. His face shone with a holiness that no man could stand, but Enoch's spirit was kept alive by grace, which let him see and not be consumed. His clothes were as white as the snow on the tallest mountains, and they flowed endlessly, without a stain or shadow. From him came love and authority, justice and mercy, all in perfect harmony. There was a rainbow-like aura around him, like a light that crowned his majesty. There were so many angels around the throne that they couldn't be seen. Their wings sparkled like silver sheets, and their voices rose together in a never-ending hymn. They said, "Holy, holy, holy," and each word echoed through the vastness of heaven like waves on an endless sea. Some bowed down, hiding their faces in awe, while others stood with their wings raised, staring at the throne in constant reverence. Enoch thought that the whole universe was singing along with them, with every star and every breath of wind echoing their praise. Everything that moved or made noise seemed to bend toward this central place, the throne that held everything together. Lightning flashed from the throne, but instead of being scared, it made the heart tremble with respect. Enoch's bones shook with the deep, majestic sound of thunder rolling like a symphony. At the base, there was a fire that looked like a river and was a living flame that stood for God's unyielding holiness. 7 lamps, each burning with eternal fire, stood in the middle of all this light. They stood for the spirits that go out into the world. Their flames twisted together and flickered in a way that seemed to match the beat of the heart of creation itself. The crystal sea stretched out before them, so clear that it perfectly reflected the glory of heaven. The whole scene felt like an endless sea of light upon light. 4 living beings stood around the throne, each one different and with eyes that showed wisdom beyond measure. One looked like a lion, which meant it was strong. Another looked like an ox, which meant it was strong. Another looked like a man, which meant it was wise. And the last one looked like an eagle, which meant it was fast. Their wings never stopped moving, and their voices never stopped singing about how holy God is. Every time they raised their voices, the many angels fell down in worship, bowing down in waves of respect before the throne. Enoch's spirit shook at the sight, as if he were seeing creation itself bowing down to its creator. He felt the weight of being human and how small he was compared to such great beauty. His heart trembled, not because he was afraid of being destroyed, but because he was so amazed that he was about to cry. Every breath felt borrowed, and every thought was too weak to hold on to what he saw. He wanted to fall down with the angels and hide his face from the light, but he couldn't look away. The throne pulled him in like the tide, strong and impossible to resist. At that moment he realized that everything in life, all of time, and all of creation came from this one source, the Eternal on the throne. The scent of holiness filled the air, sweeter than any incense on earth. It came in waves that seemed to wash over Enoch's soul. He felt like his spirit was being cleansed by its presence, and all of his doubts and fears were gone. The more he looked, the more he understood that the throne was not just a place of power, but also a place of love. It gave off justice and judgment, but mercy flowed out like rivers of living water. It was the place where compassion and righteousness met, where authority and kindness were one. Enoch's heart swelled with thankfulness because he was chosen to see this holy sight, even though he was just dust. The burden he carried from his earthly mission now seemed both heavier and lighter. Heavier because he knew more than ever how important the messages were that he was supposed to deliver, and lighter because he knew how strong the one who sent him was. He remembered that he wasn't alone because the throne was there. The power of heaven was behind every word he said and every step he took. The vision burned itself into his soul, as if it were written on the very fabric of his being. He knew he would never forget the light, the voices, the living fire, and most importantly, the glory of God sitting on the throne. Even though he was quiet, his spirit joined the angels in a song of praise that words can't describe. And even though his lips didn't move, his breath became a song of praise that rose up before the throne that ruled the heavens and the earth. Enoch's eyes were opened to a sight he had never seen before. The divine council gathering in the stillness of the heavens. It wasn't a council like the ones men think of on earth, where people argue and disagree. Instead, it was a peaceful gathering where everyone followed the Creator's order. The air itself seemed to vibrate with respect, carrying the soft sound of voices coming together in harmony. The throne of God was in the middle, and it shone light that lit up every corner of the assembly. Circles of angels surrounded it, each one in its own place according to its purpose. Their shapes glimmered like living flames, but each one had its own presence, which showed the job they had been given to do throughout all of creation. The seraphim were the closest to the throne. They were beings of fire and purity, and their wings opened up like rivers of light. Their voices never stopped praising God, and their endless worship kept the rhythm of the heavens going. Their job was not just to sing, they also had to protect the throne's holiness by making sure that everyone who came near was filled with respect. Their very existence was a flame of devotion, a reminder that holiness can both destroy and give life. When you looked at them, you could see the fire of love that kept the universe in line with its creator. The cherubim, who protect secrets that are too deep for people to understand, stood just behind them. Their shapes were both grand and humble, and their eyes could see in all directions, keeping an eye on the secrets of creation. They were given the job of protecting divine knowledge, and their wings covered sacred places to make sure that what was hidden stayed safe until the right time to reveal it. Enoch felt that their presence radiated wisdom, and that every flap of their wings whispered secrets about the stars' order, the wind's paths, and the hidden balances that kept the world in harmony. The archangels surrounded these, shining and powerful, each in charge of huge areas of heaven and earth. Their names had meaning, and when the Eternal struck them like chords of music, they rang out. They were messengers of important things, judges, guides for good people, and protectors of countries. Their voices were both soothing and commanding, and their eyes showed both love and unbreakable determination. Enoch could feel their weight. Each one was a strong tower meant to protect, deliver, and carry out orders that spread through the layers of heaven and earth. There were so many angels behind them that they were impossible to count. They stood in perfect order, each one knowing exactly what to do and being dedicated to it. Some were spirits of the winds, bringing life to all of creation. Some were in charge of the waters, making sure that the rains fell at the right time and the rivers flowed in the right direction. Others were in charge of the cycles of the sun and moon, which were the light that measured time. Some people watched over the growth of seeds, the sprouting of trees, and the beginning of life in the smallest creatures. Every angel's job, no matter how small it seemed, was part of the big picture of life. It made a harmony that reached from the heavens to the earth. Enoch saw angels of healing, whose touch was as soft as dew. They brought healing to those who were broken and tired. They moved with a soft grace, and their clothes sparkled with shades of green and gold, as if they held the freshness of spring and the promise of new life. The smell of their presence was sweeter than flowers, and it calmed everyone they came near. Angels of strength stood next to them, tall and with faces set in determination. They carried swords of light, not to hurt people, but to protect heaven's order and follow the Most High's orders. Their footsteps sounded like thunderous drums, but even their strength moved with the council's song. Some angels carried scrolls with the fates of people and nations written on them. Their hands were steady as they carried the records of time. They were the guardians of history and the messengers of prophecy, making sure that every word spoken by the Eternal was included in the story of creation as it unfolded. They moved with a serious calm, and the words they carried lit up their faces. Others brought musical instruments with them, and their voices and melodies rose in waves that made the crowd worship even more. The notes seemed to come to life, weaving themselves into colors that shimmered in the air as if the sound itself was painting the sky with praise. Enoch saw angels who watched over people with their eyes gently looking down at the earth. They were protectors, standing next to people who did the right thing and helping them avoid unseen dangers and giving them encouragement when the path got hard. Their wings spread wide with love, protecting the people they were in charge of. Each of them had a light that could cut through the darkest night. This was a reminder that no one could walk unseen under the watchful eye of heaven. Enoch's heart was moved by their devotion because he saw that the hand of the Eternal reached into even the smallest parts of human life through these hidden friends. The divine council moved in time with the stars and the tides. When one angel spoke, the others joined in, not in a chaotic way, but in perfect harmony. It wasn't through debate that decisions were made. It was through revelation from the throne. When the word of the Eternal was spoken, it spread like fire through the assembly, giving each angel a purpose. The council's true strength came from how well they obeyed each other. They all worked for the glory of the one who sat above all. Enoch was amazed as he stood among them. He understood that what he saw was the unseen order behind every sunrise and every breath, a divine plan that was too big for people to see. There was no pride or competition in the hierarchy. There was only service and devotion. Each role was important and each act had meaning. The great song of creation brought all the angels together, from the seraphim who sang praises forever to the smallest angel who led a drop of rain. Their soft voices filled the air like a lullaby for the soul, and the sound was so pure that it calmed every thought that was racing through Enoch's mind. He felt like he could float forever in its harmony, carried along by the flow of love that connected heaven and earth. He realized at that moment that the universe was not just a huge space with stars scattered throughout it. It was a living symphony held together by God's will and the faithful service of his angels. Enoch saw visions in the stillness of the heavens that had a meaning that went beyond his own life. They were visions not just for his people, but for generations to come. They were filled with the promise of freedom and the hope of a person who would rise in light and power. In these visions, the Eternal let Enoch see the shadow and outline of the one who would come, the chosen one, the anointed ruler who would fix what had been broken and bring peace where there was chaos. The pictures were full of symbols, each one with a meaning that hinted at things to come. Enoch was both amazed and humbled by what he saw, knowing that he was seeing things that were too deep for his own time to fully understand. He first saw a figure that was full of light, brighter than the sun, but soft like moonlight on still water. He wasn't like the angels, but he was more glorious than they were. His presence had both power and kindness, and justice and mercy were perfectly balanced. The nations of the earth were gathered around him, and the righteous were drawn to him, as if they had been waiting for him all along. His eyes were steady, cutting through lies and revealing the truth. They were also full of love that healed instead of judging. Enoch saw a throne next to the throne of the Ancient of Days that was ready for this chosen one. It shone with purity and was not tainted by sin. A river of justice flowed from it like clear crystal. This river flowed across the land, washing away greed, violence, and oppression, and leaving behind peaceful fields and righteous paths. The vision was like the calm of dawn after a storm, when the air is fresh and everything looks new. It wasn't a throne of power, but of healing, where the broken were healed and the humble were raised up. Enoch saw symbols that were like living stories. He saw a branch growing out of a tree that had been cut down, with its roots deep in dry ground. But from that stump, life came back, green and full of promise, reaching up to the light. The branch got stronger and bore fruit that fed the people. This vision talked about hope coming from despair and life coming from death. It was a picture of renewal, a quiet promise that the Eternal's plans could not be stopped, even when everything seemed lost. Then there was the picture of a lamb, clean and pure, standing in front of a lot of people. Its kindness disarmed the violent, and its lack of pride won over the proud. But this lamb had a strength that was unlike any other. The lamb's presence stopped the accusations and filled the air with the smell of sacrifice, as if its meekness could make up for what had been done wrong. Enoch saw the lamb raised up and exalted, and as it rose, the nations were healed. This symbol had a depth that stayed with Enoch, a mystery that he couldn't fully explain but that he felt spoke of deliverance that wasn't brought about by strength but by willing surrender. Enoch also saw a shepherd walking among sheep that were spread out. The flock was tired, hurt from walking on dangerous paths, and many had been led astray by false guides. But when the shepherd came, his voice called them, and they knew it was him right away. The sheep came together, their wounds bandaged and their restlessness calmed. The shepherd took them to green fields and calm waters, where they found peace they had long since lost. Enoch felt calm and sure that the one who would come would not only rule, but also care for him, not only command, but also love him. The heavens showed him even more pictures. He saw a stone coming down from above that had not been cut by people. It hit men's idols and broke them into dust that the Wallon and carried away. But the stone itself turned into a mountain that covered the whole earth, strong and unbreakable. This mountain became a safe place. Its peak reached up to the sky, and its base covered the land. Nations came to it in droves, looking for shelter and knowledge, and they found rest in its shadow. It was a vision of a kingdom that was not built by people, but by God, and that would last forever and be safe. When Enoch saw the figure of a Son of Man riding on clouds in heaven, his heart trembled. He looked like a person, but he also looked like a god. He had the power of a god, and the look of a person. He was given power, glory, and an eternal kingdom, and everyone served him with joy. His rule was not limited by time or by death. It was a light that could not be put out, and it lasted for generations. This vision gave Enoch a calm sense of peace that went beyond his fear of the present. There was also the vision of a scribe who wrote down what people did and how the days went by. But this scribe had the power to judge and forgive. which was different from the angels who carried scrolls. He opened books and, with wisdom that no one could question, he told the difference between truth and lies, good and evil. But his judgments were tempered with mercy, as if love and not just law were behind each choice. Enoch was amazed by this. He felt that in the one to come, justice and compassion would meet, and together they would bring balance to the world. The images kept coming, combining symbols of light, growth, sacrifice, and kingship, all pointing to the same person, the Messiah. Enoch didn't know his name, but he knew what kind of person he was from what he saw. Humble but exalted, gentle but strong, fair but merciful, eternal but living among men. The visions gave him a quiet sense of hope and comfort that the problems his generation was facing weren't the end of the story. There would be one who would come and fix everything, even creation itself. Enoch's heart stayed calm even after the visions faded. Their hope was like a soft light shining in the dark, steady and unchanging. Even though his people might not understand yet, and the world might be full of corruption and grief, the Eternal had already made a way for them to be saved. And in the peace of his heart, Enoch knew that God's promises would not fail. The one who was to come was already known in heaven, and his reign was as sure as the stars themselves. Enoch was raised again into the realm of vision, where time seemed to fold in on itself and show him the long path of human destiny. He didn't just see the problems of his own generation or the shadows cast by the fallen watchers and their children. He saw the bigger story of humanity, the choices it makes, the problems it faces, and the moral lessons that are woven into its path. The Eternal let him see the future of humanity not as a set script carved in stone, but as a tapestry where faith, choices, and actions shaped the patterns of life. The visions came in waves, and each one taught me something and spoke clearly and kindly about justice, compassion, and the duty of people. The first picture that came to mind was of a field that went on and on, with many hands scattering seeds in it. Some seeds fell on fertile ground and grew into strong, fruitful trees whose branches provided shade and food. Others fell on rocks and grew for a short time before dying in the hot sun. Some were choked by thorns that grew up and killed them. Enoch knew that this vision was about how people would live. Their hearts were the soil, and their actions were the seeds. Those who worked on being good would grow like strong trees, but those who didn't listen to heaven's advice would lose their strength. The vision didn't judge Enoch. Instead, it taught him that the choices of each person would shape the future of all people. He was shown another scene, a city rising in pride with towers reaching up as if to touch the sky. People inside bragged about their power, wealth, and strength, forgetting the hand that had given them life. The walls were made of stone and gold, but inside the city, the cries of the poor and oppressed went unheard. The city's foundation shook, its towers fell, and the ground was covered in dust from its ruins over time. It was clear from the lesson that injustice destroys even the strongest structures, and that pride makes people blind to their own downfall. Mercy, fairness, and humility before the Creator are what make someone truly great, not statues made of stone. The visions then showed Enoch a valley full of people from all over the world, speaking different languages and coming together. There was a huge, unshakable scale in the middle where deeds were weighed. One side showed kindness by sharing bread, comforting the sad, and being honest even when lying could have gotten them more. The other side did cruel things like lying, stealing, and hurting others. Enoch was amazed that even the smallest act could change the course of events. A cup of water given out of kindness was worth more than a lot of money kept out of selfishness, and a word of truth was worth more than 1,000 lies. The Eternal was showing him that every choice mattered, and that even the smallest lives could change the course of history. Another vision appeared like a stream running through dry land. He saw people walking in the dark, scared and confused. Then a light appeared among them. It wasn't a blazing fire, but it was steady and soft, lighting their way. As they walked in its light, Their burdens got lighter, and their steps got steadier. But some people turned away from the light and went to the shadows to hide what they had done. People who followed the light found peace, but people who turned away fell and stumbled. The lesson was about choice. People would always be shown the light, but it would be up to their hearts to decide whether to walk in it or hide from it. Then, Enoch's spirit was taken to a place where families were sitting around tables, sharing food and laughter, and being kind to each other. The vision was different from other families, where selfishness made hearts cold and fights broke out all the time. He learned that the Eternal was saying that the future of humanity was not only decided by big wars or powerful nations, but also by the small things that people do every day, like parents taking care of their children, honest trade, friends being patient, and love that kept communities together. These small things made or broke societies. Then Enoch saw visions of rulers and judges sitting in places of power. Some listened to wisdom and ruled fairly, protected the weak, and led their people with steady hands. But some gave in to greed and abused their power over their subjects. The difference was clear, but the message was soft but strong. Those who ruled unfairly would one day face a greater judge, and their power, no matter how strong it seemed, would not last. No crown or throne could go against the standard of justice set by the Eternal. The vision grew even bigger, showing how people go through cycles of rising and falling. Like waves, generations came and left their marks in the sand. Some generations sought righteousness, and their days were full of peace. Some people turned away from the truth and were taken over by conflict. But through it all, the Eternal stayed true, giving direction and new life to those who humbly turned back. The pattern was not meant to make people sad. It was meant to teach. The fate of humanity was never hopeless, because every day brought the chance to make the right choice, live with integrity, and seek the Eternal's wisdom. Enoch saw another picture of two paths that lay ahead of all people. One path was wide and smooth, full of fun and ease, but at the end it led to emptiness, and sadness. The other path was narrow and full of challenges and sacrifices, but it led to a place of peace and happiness. A lot of people crowded onto the wide path, laughing as they went. Only a few people took the narrow way, but those who took the narrow path were welcomed with open arms and songs at the end of their journey. The vision spoke clearly and softly. Ease without righteousness leads to ruin, but sticking to the truth brings eternal peace. The last pictures that came to Enoch's mind were of kids playing in fields, their laughter rising into the sky like music. Their innocence reminded me of how pure humans were made and of the hope that still lived inside them. The Eternal seemed to say that the future was not a story of despair, but of hope. Even when things go wrong, people can still choose to do good and start over. The laughter of children was a sign that life and hope would never die completely as long as people turned to righteousness. Enoch felt the weight of what he had seen as the visions faded, but he also felt calm because he knew that the future of humanity was not set in stone. These lessons would last forever, that a good life could be built on justice, kindness, humility, and truth. The most important thing was not the power of nations or the wealth of kings, but the quiet strength of hearts that chose what was right. Enoch found peace in this truth, which held the fate of all people. The Spirit took Enoch once more into the realm of vision, beyond the limits of ordinary sight. The heavens stretched out before him in their vastness, with stars twinkling like jewels on a velvet sea. The Eternal opened the sky to him, showing him not only the beauty of creation, but also the order and harmony that are built into it. Enoch knew that what he was being shown was not for his own vanity or pride, but so that he could see the wisdom that lay behind, the way the universe works. The Book of Heavenly Secrets was a book that didn't have any ink or parchment. It was written in light, movement, and divine precision. He first saw the stars, which were many and all moving along a set path. They weren't just random sparks in the sky, they were living witnesses to order, rising and setting at the command of the one who made them. He learned that some stars were brighter than others and were in charge of the heavens, guiding the seasons on earth below. To Enoch, the constellations were signs of appointed times, marking the flow of ages. To humans, they looked like groups of light. He realized that the stars were like a heavenly clock, keeping track of the passage of time and the unfolding of God's plans as he watched them move. Then, with calm precision, he saw the moon go through its cycles, getting bigger and smaller. He watched it rise from the dark to the full, then fade away again, like the way breath moves across the sky. The crescent moon meant new beginnings, the full moon meant completeness, and the waning moon was a reminder to be humble and come back. The moon controlled the tides and the times for planting and harvesting, affecting every living thing on earth. Enoch understood that even the smallest part of creation had a purpose and that people lived in a plan that was much bigger than they thought. The sun, too, showed off its beauty. Enoch saw it move every day from east to west and then back again through the dark places of night that no one else could see. He was told about the gates that the sun passed through, entering and leaving at the right time according to God's plan. Its warmth kept people alive, its light marked the passage of time, and its power controlled the seasons. But Enoch was reminded that the sun should not be worshipped because it was just a servant of the eternal, doing its job faithfully. Even the brightest star in the sky had to obey, which is a lesson for people to remember their place in creation. Then, the stars were shown how to move through too. Sky, each one given a path like a scribe is given a line of writing. Some stars ruled the days of the year, others marked the season's changes, and still others were hidden from view, keeping secrets that would one day be revealed. Enoch knew that no one could stray from their path without consequences, because harmony in the heavens was a sign of the Eternal's justice. If the stars were out of order, the earth would be out of order too. But the Eternal kept everything in order, making sure that the balance of the cosmos stayed the same. Enoch learned more about the heavenly calendars, which kept track of days, months, and years with great accuracy. He was told that there are 364 days in a perfect year, which are split into 4 equal parts, each with its own season of light. This calendar was set in stone by God, not by people. It included festivals, harvests, and holy times. He saw that the good people would honor these set times and live in harmony with the heavens, but the bad people would ignore them and get confused. Time was not random. It was sacred, a gift, and a way to measure and guide people. He also saw the winds coming from all 4 corners of the earth. He was shown how they brought rains, storms, warmth, and cold, each of which played a part in the cycles of nature. The northern wind brought frost and clarity, the southern wind brought warmth and growth, the eastern wind brought light, and the western wind brought rain. These forces were not random. They were controlled by angelic watchers, each of whom was in charge of a different area. Because of this, Enoch saw that the breath of the earth was connected to the breath of heaven, which showed him the great unity of creation. He was also shown secret rooms where hail, snow, and lightning were kept until the right time for them to be let out. The treasures of water were kept in the sky, and when they were told to, they fell as rain, filling rivers and feeding fields. The bolts of thunder that scared people were shown to be servants of divine order. Enoch understood that what people thought was scary or chaotic was really part of a bigger harmony. The Eternal had power over everything, even the storm. Enoch saw angels moving among the stars in his vision. They were keeping an eye on the cosmic order as guardians. Each had a job to do to make sure that the heavenly bodies followed their paths. Some kept track of the sun, some led the moon, and some protected the vault of stars. Their work was hidden from people, but their presence made sure that day and night, season and harvest went on without fail. This showed Enoch how big God's kingdom was, where even the smallest things were taken care of. He was then able to see things that had not yet been revealed to people. He saw that the lights in the sky also showed what was going on earth, marking times of judgment and times of righteousness. Stars falling from the sky meant that nations would fall, and sudden brightness in the sky meant that there was hope. The cosmos was like a scroll on which the Eternal wrote, and only those who could see it could understand what it said. Enoch was scared when he learned this, because he knew that the heavens and the earth were connected, and that they showed each other patterns of justice and mercy. As the vision went on, he realized that the book of heavenly secrets was not just about stars and cycles. It was also about how creation and the Creator could be in harmony. People were meant to live in harmony with the heavens and respect the order that ruled everything. If you went against this order, you did be confused, but if you followed it, you would be at peace. Enoch held this knowledge with respect, knowing that it was not for bragging or showing off, but to help people become wise. The vision faded away slowly. The stars went back to their normal brightness, the moon went back to its quiet glow, and the sun went back to its usual path. But the book of heavenly secrets stayed open in Enoch's heart, reminding him that everything around him was full of meaning and that every cycle of light and shadow held the wisdom of the Eternal. Enoch's spirit took him to a place where the light from the heavens faded into darkness and the air was thick with silence. He had never seen anything like this before. The beauty of the Eternal was hidden here, and the vast space was filled with a sense of solemn justice. Before him lay deep, dark caves that were part of the very fabric of creation. No star shone there, and the sun's warmth couldn't reach them. These were the prisons that were made for people who had once been great, but had turned away from their divine calling. Once watchers of humanity, the fallen angels were now trapped in these depths, waiting for their final judgment. He saw them chained with bonds that were not made by human hands, but were made from the very word of the Eternal, which is unbreakable and lasts forever. Their once bright forms were now dull, and the brilliance that had marked their service in the heavens was gone. They had chosen to teach forbidden knowledge and lead mortals astray, and now they felt the weight of what they had done. Their wings, which had once let them fly quickly through the air, were folded up and still, unable to lift them out of their cage. Enoch could feel their sadness in their silence, but he also knew that their punishment was fair. The walls of the cave glowed with a light that was cold, not warm, like memories. Enoch felt that the Eternal was close by, even in the places of judgment, making sure that justice was not left undone. The fallen didn't cry out in defiance. They cried out in despair because they knew the order given to them couldn't be changed. They traded eternal light for shadows that only lasted for a short time on earth, and the price was being cut off from the presence of the one they had once served. Enoch was shown how the angels had been thrown out of heaven and into these dark prisons. The Eternal told powerful archangels to bind them by wrapping chains around their bodies and throwing them into the depths. Each was put in a room that fit the size of his crime. Some were deeper than others, and some were darker than the rest. Their voices rose in sorrow, like thunder from afar, but their words had no power to change what had been decided. Heaven's justice was strong, and the order of creation said that the corruption had to be stopped. He saw that their leader, the one who had caused the rebellion, was tied up more tightly than anyone else. The chains around him glowed with a fierce light that burned against his body like fire that didn't burn but held him back. His proud and defiant look fell in defeat. The archangels who did the binding were not cruel. They were following orders, just like everyone else. There was no malice in punishment, only the steady hand of divine justice, putting things right that had been wrong. Enoch walked on, following a shining messenger, and came to the rooms where the dead were kept. There were a lot of shadows in the air, but there was also a quiet rhythm that seemed to be part of the larger harmony. He knew that the prisons were not just for punishment, but also to show everyone that rebellion cannot stand against the eternal. He could feel the heavy silence in the chambers. It reminded him that the people who used to fill the skies with song were now quiet, their voices silenced by their own choices. He was able to feel their sadness for a moment, and it hurt his heart a lot. The fallen remembered how bright it had been where they had been, how close they had been to the Eternal's throne, and how happy they had been to serve among the heavenly hosts. Now that memory burned inside them, not as comfort, but as pain, because they couldn't go back to what they had left behind. Enoch felt compassion rise up in him, but he also knew that justice had to win. There was a time for mercy and a time for order. Without order, everything would fall apart into chaos. The angel who was guiding Enoch spoke softly to him, reminding him that these prisons were not just for punishment, but also to keep people on the right path. If the fallen had stayed free, their evil would have spread without limit, destroying both heaven and earth. By tying them up here, the Eternal made sure that creation could go on in peace and that people could still follow the path of light. The chains were not only a sign of judgment, but they also protected the cosmos and kept it in balance. Enoch was told that the fallen would stay bound until the last day of judgment. On that day, the Eternal would call them out of their cells to face the full force of the law. Fire would test everything, and everyone would be able to see how rebellious they were. They waited in silence until then, in a stillness that made them think of what they had lost. The idea of being in darkness forever was worse than the chains themselves, because being cut off from the Eternal was the worst thing that could happen. Enoch realized that this vision was not just for him when he looked at them, but for everyone who would one day hear his words. It was a warning and a lesson that even very powerful people are not above the law. When they chose to rebel, no rank, no beauty, and no ancient strength could protect them from justice. People were also supposed to learn from their example and live in humility and obedience, remembering that the Eternal's will keeps all life going. As the vision came to an end, Enoch couldn't stop thinking about how quiet the prison halls were. He felt the weight of what he had seen, angels chained in darkness, waiting for the day when justice would be done. It wasn't a cruel sight. It was a solemn order that reminded me that the universe itself bends toward what is right. The Eternal's justice was alive, unshaken, and everlasting, even in the stillness of the deepest shadows. Enoch was taken up in a vision again, and the earth looked like it was covered in a shadow. The lands felt heavy, as if they were weighed down by corruption, and the cries of injustice rose up like smoke that made the sky darker. He was shown that the world was beautiful in its design, but the choices of both men and the fallen ones who had walked among them had made it dirty. The Eternal, who is very patient and merciful, would not let the imbalance stay. Creation itself wanted to be cleansed because the rivers, mountains, winds, and even the soil held memories of peace. Now they were groaning under the weight of chaos, waiting for the hand of renewal. Enoch thought that the first signs of purification started with a movement in the sky. The winds were let loose at the right times, and they blew across the earth with great force. They got rid of the stale smell of corruption and the dust of arrogance that had settled on nations. Then the rains came, not just in light drops, but in heavy, torrents that cleaned the ground. Rivers rose, valleys filled, and places that were once dry came back to life. The waters washed away the marks left by the rebellion of angels and men, moving as if by unseen hands. But this wasn't just a random flood, it was the planned work of justice, getting the earth ready for a new beginning. In Enoch's vision, the mountains stood tall and silent, their peaks piercing the clouds. He saw that even they were affected by the cleansing. Light flames moved across their ridges, clearing out the dark places where shadows had tried to hide. The fire didn't destroy the mountain, it just burned away the dirt that was stuck to it, making the stone look like it had just been formed. Enoch knew that this fire wasn't the anger of cruelty, but the cleansing breath of the Eternal, who fixes what has been broken. He was reminded that no part of creation was beyond redemption when touched by divine order. Even the stones shone again. The trees in the woods, which had been bent and broken by people who didn't care for them, stood straight again, their leaves shining with new life. Birds filled their branches, singing songs that had been silenced by the violence of people. Animals moved through the fields in harmony, no longer being driven into chaos by the disorder of humans. Enoch saw that the earth was being brought back into balance and that its cycles were being made pure again. The grass grew thick, the water ran clear, and the stars shone brightly in the sky, free from the smoke of sin. This cleansing wasn't just for looks, it was also for truth, bringing creation back to the harmony it had at the beginning. Enoch's heart was heavy when he saw how much this renewal would cost. While creation was being healed, those who were corrupt couldn't stand the touch of its cleansing. In the same way that light can't stay in the presence of darkness, injustice couldn't stand up to the Eternal's work of cleaning. Enoch saw the proud brought low, the violent silenced, and the unfair swept away like chaff before the wind. The waters that refreshed the good became a flood against the bad, and the fire that made the mountains shine burned away the lies. This was also justice, even though it was sad, because it showed that no one could escape the truth of their own choices. The vision got clearer, and Enoch saw the skies opening up with light. A light brighter than the sun shone down, steady and not harsh, lighting up every dark corner. Shadows ran away, secrets came out, and nothing could stay hidden. The Eternal looked at humanity as if they were transparent, with their hearts wide open. The cleansing was not just of the land and water, but also of the souls of all people. Enoch felt the calmness of that moment, when everything he thought and did was either brought into harmony or thrown away. He understood that the cleansing was as much inside as it was outside, because the earth needed to be renewed as much as the human spirit did. He saw the oceans rise, and their depths moved as if they had just woken up. Things inside them moved with power and grace, free from the evil that had even touched the water. The seas, which were huge and unmeasured, sparkled in the heavenly light and sent purity back into the skies. The waves rolled gently onto the shore, and their rhythm no longer brought unrest, but peace. Enoch thought he was at the place where heaven and earth met, where everything was in perfect harmony. The cleaning didn't destroy anything. It fixed things that had gone wrong. Enoch was told that this cleansing would have effects on many generations. The children of those who did right would live in a world that had been reborn, where the cycles of heaven and earth worked perfectly together. The seasons would come when they were supposed to, the harvests would be plentiful, and the connection between God and creation would be felt again. There would be peace in the air, not the sound of violence, and the ground would give up its bounty without any work. This was the hope that came after the cleansing, that people could live in peace with all of creation and walk humbly in the light of the Eternal. But the vision didn't end with just being still. Enoch was given hints of suspense that were so subtle that they seemed to be meant to remind him that cleansing is a process that moves in waves. Times of trial and renewal would come and go, just like the rain. People would have to make choices again, and each choice would have an effect on all of creation. The cleansing he saw was both a moment and a promise. It was a reminder that the Eternal would not leave the world, but he would also not ignore its corruption. Until the last harmony was revealed, the cycles of justice and mercy would go on. Enoch stood in the vision and took deep breaths of the fresh air, which made him feel peaceful. The rivers looked like glass, the skies were full of quiet beauty, and the earth seemed to sing a song of thanks. A soft, quiet chorus of all creation whispered together like the hush of evening when the day is done. Enoch held this picture in his heart, knowing it was not just a vision of the future but a truth written into the heart of creation itself. that the Eternal would always cleanse, restore, and lead the world back to the harmony it was meant to have with wisdom and patience. Enoch was taken back into a vision where the world's shadows disappeared, and a light that couldn't be measured opened up in front of him. The path went up into places that had never been tainted by sin, and he was shown what would happen to those who walked in faithfulness. The beauty of it calmed his heart, because the reward for the righteous was not only freedom from pain, but also eternal peace. The air itself seemed to be full of quiet harmony, and every sound, color, and movement had a calming effect. He saw a garden that was bigger than he could have imagined, with trees that reached high into the bright sky. The branches moved in time with the music of the heavens, and the leaves shone like little lanterns glowing softly. There were rivers in this land that were as clear as crystal and flowed in graceful paths between fields of flowers. The water shone with silver and gold, and the sound was soft like a lullaby. People who drank from them not only quenched their thirst in body, but also in spirit, because the streams carried a blessing that refreshed the soul. The people Enoch saw here moved freely and had happy, shining faces. There was no sign of pain, grief, or tiredness on them. They walked lightly as if the ground welcomed them, and their eyes shone with peace that came from being in the presence of the Eternal. They said nice things, and their voices were warm and wrapped around everyone who heard them. There was no fighting, no jealousy, and no hint of hatred between them. Their hearts were joined in love that came from the Creator himself. Angels stood among them, not as distant watchers but as friends, their forms bright and graceful. Their wings sparkled with colors that changed like the light of dawn on the horizon. Their voices rose and fell like waves on the sea, and their songs filled the air with such deep peace that Enoch felt his own spirit rest in it. The angels talked to the faithful with love, showing them the way, joining them in their joy, and sharing in the blessings of the kingdom. There was no difference between people and angels here. They were all in the same harmony, basking in the light of the Eternal One. Enoch's eyes went to the horizon, where a city of light appeared. It was brighter than the sun, but not too bright to look at. The walls weren't made of stone, they were made of living light. The gates were open, welcoming everyone who was called to come in. The streets went inward and were paved with light that looked like stars had been laid on the ground. Inside the city, laughter and song rose softly. It wasn't loud or chaotic, it was steady and sweet, and it carried the sound of happiness. There were no guards to stop people from coming in because no one who did was dishonest or mean. Only people with clean hearts were allowed to walk there, and they could do so freely with the blessing of the Eternal. He saw banquets set up not in a fancy way, but in a warm way, with long tables set up under trees whose flowers never faded. The tables were full of fruits of every color, and each one was more colorful and healthy than anything else on earth. The people who were there ate with joy, not because they were hungry, but because they were together. They enjoyed the food as much as the feeling of being together. Everyone was remembered and welcomed. Every soul had a place, and every hand was welcome. Sharing the meal was an act of worship in and of itself, a sign of the love that brought them together. The vision got clearer, and Enoch saw fields where kids played freely, their laughter ringing through the air like soft bells. They ran without fear, their steps light as they chased butterflies that sparkled like jewels. The elders sat with them, not weak but strong, their eyes bright and strong. Kids, Storm and innocence mixed together because time didn't seem to matter here anymore. Young and old people shared the same happiness and were at peace with each other. Enoch saw the presence of the Eternal above everything else. It was like a huge light that filled the sky and the earth. It wasn't a light that blinded, it was one that drew everyone closer. Life itself flowed from this light, and the faithful were happy to live in it. They looked up at it, their eyes shining with tears of thankfulness, not sadness. They sang without getting tired, and their voices blended in harmonies that echoed the love of their Creator. There was a union of heaven and earth, of people and angels, all resting in the glory of the one who had made everything. Enoch saw that even the smallest things were full of peace. The flowers that never died made the air smell good. The waters flowed with no end in sight. The birds sang notes that sounded like angel songs, and the winds didn't bring a storm. They just whispered calm. There was a place for silence, not empty, but full, as if the stillness itself was alive with the presence of the eternal. All things, from the biggest star to the tiniest blade of grass, shone with happiness at being part of this eternal reward. He was told that those who were faithful on earth would have their sorrows turned into joy in this world. The Eternal would remember every tear shed in trial and wipe them away, leaving no sign of pain. Every good deed done here would grow into a blessing that would last forever. The faithful would never be forgotten. Their names were written on the heart of the Eternal, and their reward was greater than words could say. Enoch's spirit trembled with awe when he realized that this vision was not only a promise for the future, but also a glimpse into the love that had always guided creation. As Enoch stood in this vision, he didn't feel overwhelmed by how grand it was, but by how peaceful it was. The real reward wasn't gold, crowns, treasures, or power. It was the Eternal himself always being OC. The righteous would always live in love, walk without fear, sing without end, and be filled with unshakable joy. This was their inheritance. And as the vision faded, he took with him the calm and peace of that world, which would never go away. Enoch was led through realms where the rhythm of creation pulsed in steady harmony as the vision unfolded in soft patterns of light. The huge sky didn't show itself as a quiet void. Instead, it was a living order, full of motion and balance. He was shown the sun's paths, which were bright and blazing as it moved across the sky, and the moon's calm silver path, which wove its way through the stillness of the night. Both were not just lights. They were servants of divine order who had been following the rules set for them since the beginning of time. Their movements changed the very nature of days, months, and years, like a cosmic clock that never stopped ticking. Enoch was told to pay close attention because these were not random paths, but holy circuits that the Most High had ordered. The sun rose from the east through gates that were bright and steady. Angels were in charge of these huge, shining gates, which opened and closed in time with the seasons. The sun didn't rise by chance. It did so because it was time. It traveled across the sky, bringing power and warmth, waking up the earth, feeding the fields, and giving life to everything that needed its rays. The sun stood tall and fierce in the middle of its path, commanding the heavens with golden majesty. Then it slowly went down to the west, passing through gates where night welcomed the world again. But even in this place, there was no chaos. The angels who watched over the heavens guided it to its rest, where it would start again at dawn. The moon, on the other hand, moved more softly, gently, and calmly, like a reflection of quiet mystery. She came out at her time, lighting up the sky with her cool light and being a friend to those who lived under the night sky. Enoch was shown how she grew and shrank, not randomly, but as part of her law. She got brighter and brighter until she was fully lit up. Then, slowly, her light faded away in stages until only a thin crescent remained. Then, like a loyal servant, she came back again, growing brighter until her fullness blessed the night again. This cycle showed the months in a sacred order, guided festivals, and set the rhythm of the days for those who watched from below. Enoch saw that the sun and moon were never in competition with each other. Instead, they worked together, each doing its job without getting in the way of the other. The sun ruled the day, telling people when to work and when to live, while the moon ruled the night, bringing rest, reflection, and peace. Their partnership made a balance in creation, where light and dark could coexist without fighting. The stars were also part of this rhythm. There were so many of them, but they never strayed from the paths that were set for them. The Creator gave each star a place, a job, and a brightness, and none of them went outside those limits. The sky wasn't a mess of moving lights. It was a grand design, a complicated tapestry of following the rules of the universe. These heavenly beings measured steps, brought about the seasons. The earth got warmer and seeds woke up under the ground when the sun stayed in the sky longer. The cold whispered of rest as the sun went down earlier and the shadows grew longer. The land got ready for sleep. The moon also controlled the tides and cycles. Her presence touched the waters and gently moved them up and down. Enoch could see how these huge movements in the sky affected even the smallest things on earth. There was a reason for everything, and nothing was left alone because every movement in the sky affected life on earth. As he watched the sun and moon stay true to their word, Enoch's heart grew still. They never doubted their duty or put off doing their job. They kept their appointments every day and every night with unwavering devotion. He was told that the act of creation itself was a lesson in trust and obedience. People were told to stay on their path and trust in the one who set these rhythms, just like the sun always rose and the moon always shone in her time. The cosmic dance above wasn't just for show. It was also a lesson, a silent sermon about loyalty and faith in God's plan. As guardians of the gates of heaven, the angels kept an eye on this heavenly order. They were glowing beings dressed in light who made sure that the sun and moon went in and out through the right gates at the right times. Their presence served as a reminder that everything in heaven and on earth was being watched closely and that nothing was left to chance. Every time the sun rose and set, got brighter and dimmer, there was authority and care. The heavens were full of guardianship, and the movements of heavenly bodies were seen as sacred duties that were never taken lightly and were always respected. People on earth looked to the sky for signs, and Enoch saw this. The sun's cycles told farmers when to plant and when to harvest. People who traveled used the stars to find their way. The phases of the moon marked religious and festival days. Even animals in the wild reacted to the rhythm. Birds moved with the seasons. Water levels rose and fell with the moon's pull, and flowers bloomed in time with the light and warmth. The heavens spoke to the earth all the time, weaving the lives of all living things into the great song of creation. People didn't just hear the voice of the Most High in thunder or visions. They heard it in the steady pulse of the sun, moon, and stars, which spoke in silence through their faithful order. Enoch felt completely at peace in this vision. The never-ending rhythm, the slow change from day to night, and the graceful change of seasons all reminded him of how constant God's will is. It was as if the Creator had painted time into the sky, letting everyone who looked up see a reflection of forever. The sun's blaze, the moon's glow, and the stars' twinkling chorus were more than just lights. They were reminders of the one who kept them going, who kept the universe in balance, and whose laws made sure that chaos would never win over order. The silence of the heavens spoke louder than any words to Enoch, telling him of a creation held together by faithfulness, harmony, and peace. Enoch was taken to a place where the layers of creation opened up like veils being pulled back one at a time. Each climb showed more amazing things than the last, and the vision was not just fleeting images, but a trip through the very fabric of the heavens. In the first heaven, he found a place that was full of the softest light and where the air seemed to hum with a gentle vibration. Angels moved like streams of light, taking care of the clouds, winds, and rains that fed the earth below. Their wings sparkled as they moved the water from huge reservoirs, making sure that the rivers and seas never ran out of it. These protectors of the lower heaven kept the weather in check. Their hands moved with quiet precision, and their faces showed that they were obedient to the one who had put them there. As Enoch climbed higher, he reached the second heaven, where the difference shocked his senses. Shadows stretched across huge halls, and in some places, people were crying and fighting. Here were spirits in chains, beings who had gone off course and were now stuck in prison until the time of judgment came. But even in this serious place, there were flashes of light because angels stood guard and made sure that rebellion couldn't spread beyond its limits. It was a place of reminders that disobedience had consequences and that order was always kept. The Watchers' silence, their strong stance, and the quiet echoes of those trapped in darkness all carried the weight of justice. The third heaven took Enoch to a place of beauty that was unlike anything else. Here, gardens went on, full of fruits that glowed with their own light. Flowers that could only be seen from space whispered in colors that earthly eyes couldn't see. Trees with branches like crystal provided shade. The smell alone seemed to calm the heart, and streams of living water flowed through the land, making a sound like song. This was the home that was made for the good people, a place of rest and joy where no evil could enter. Angels walked with souls who had been found worthy. They were gentle, their voices were calm, and their joy never ended. Enoch felt the pull of this world, where the harmony of creation was at its best, but he was told to keep going because the journey was not over yet. He was taken to the fourth heaven as he climbed higher, where the movements of the great lights became clear. The sun was so strong that it shone with fire so bright that the air around it shook. Angels were always there to help it move across the sky. The moon also had a special place, where she was dressed in silver calm, and her phases were carefully measured by the people who stood next to her. All the stars were on their way, and none of them strayed from their path. Each one shone with the brightness that was given to it. The order of times, seasons, and years came down from this heaven like a beautiful song Enoch saw. Oh, that this was the great clockwork of creation, kept running by the eternal decree and supported by angelic hosts who never got tired of their work. There was a different sound in the fifth heaven, voices rising like a big choir. Angels here wore bright clothes and sang with awe and longing in front of the Most High's throne. They sang praises with voices that never wavered, and their harmonies blended like rivers flowing into the sea. But there were also angels who looked tired and heavy, as if they wanted to come down to earth to do jobs that hadn't been given to them yet. They waited patiently because their time had not yet come, but they still honored the Almighty. The song was like a prayer reaching up to heaven, full of the tension of waiting for an answer. Then came the sixth heaven, which was bigger than anything else, where angels of wisdom and power met. Enoch saw beings here whose heights were great, whose clothes were brighter than lightning, and whose voices sounded like thunder rolling across the sky. They were given the task of knowing how the world was made, keeping the secrets of order and balance, and writing down the actions of everyone in the heavenly books. Some people looked after the stars, others measured the width of the sky, and still others made sure that the laws of goodness were kept on earth. This was the Council of Order, a place of great responsibility where no detail of life was too small to be noticed and taken into account. Enoch felt a deep respect for their work, as if he were standing in a library made of light and truth. Finally, he was taken to the seventh heaven, where words seemed to disappear in front of his eyes. Radiance came from all sides, brighter than 1,000 suns, but it was easy on his spirit's eyes. There were rows of thrones of fire, each one occupied by angels of unimaginable glory. Above them all, the throne of the Most High rose in majesty. Living light flames surrounded it, and rivers of light poured out, filling the sky with light that never stopped. The seraphim hovered nearby, their 6 wings covering them in respect. They cried out in voices that shook the very foundations, but their song was full of calm devotion. Cherubim with eyes that looked like burning jewels moved in solemn patterns, and their gaze cut through everything. The archangels stood close together, glowing and strong, protecting secrets that were too big to talk about. The Almighty filled every corner of this place with eternal light, leaving no shadow behind. Enoch fell to the ground, too amazed by what he saw to stand. His spirit shook, but a great peace came over him because he knew he was in the holiest of places. The journey through the heavens had shown him the whole order of creation, from the guardians of the weather in the first heaven to the blazing throne in the seventh. Angels of all kinds and ranks moved together perfectly, their jobs weaving together the vast fabric of life. Each heaven had its own beauty, weight, and purpose, but they all worked together to show the glory of the one who ruled over all. The vision of the seven heavens was not just a display of greatness. It was also a reminder that every part of creation, both seen and unseen, was guided by divine wisdom and eternal law. Enoch was led to a place where the sky looked like a book with pages made of fire and silver. The stars shone with a steady light, as if the Creator had carefully placed each one. They weren't just randomly spread out. They were arranged in paths and constellations, making a huge map across the sky. He felt the deep calm of a cosmic rhythm as he looked up. No star was late in rising or faltering in its descent. Their movements weren't left to chance. They were guided by unseen angelic hands that made sure the harmony of creation would never lose its balance. The quiet between the stars had a kind of music, a sound that spoke of order too big for human is to understand. The angels who kept these lights were bright and still, and they were looking at the courses they were measuring. They carried scrolls of light with glowing strokes that showed the cycles of days and seasons. When Enoch saw one angel raise his hand, the stars moved in response, each one moving to its exact position as if it were answering a call. In this vision, the moon also showed up. Her silver glow was softer than the sun's, but it was just as important. She had guardians who watched over her and carefully marked her waxing and waning. Her cycle was written into the flow of time, which set the pace of months and the times of festivals and seasons. The sun, which was on fire with golden flames, was shown moving across the sky. Its light was measured not only by hours, but also by purpose. It rose and set at the right times, and beings with wings that shone like bronze in the light watched over it. They made sure that the earth got just the right amount of warmth, never more and never less than it needed. Every season, the sun brought life by making seeds grow and rivers flow. It was more than just a light for the day. It was a reminder of God's faithfulness, which has never wavered since the beginning of time. Enoch felt at peace, knowing that even the brightest star in the sky had to do what the one who commanded it said. He was shown the secrets of the seasons themselves, not just the sun and moon. The patterns of spring were soft and gentle. Flowers opened when they were ready. Rains fell in soft abundance, and fields turned green. Angels of renewal took care of this season, making sure that life came back after the winter sleep. Then came summer with its abundance. The sun's heat ripened fruit and grain, and the angels of strength kept the balance by keeping rivers flowing and winds steady. The leaves turned in the fall, the harvest was gathered with joy, and angels of completion blessed each field. Winter was not forgotten, even though it was quiet and cold. Guardians of rest watched over its stillness to make sure that the cycle of life could start again with new energy. Enoch saw that these seasons weren't just random changes. They were woven together like threads in a tapestry. Each one flowed into the next in a smooth way, and none of them stood out on their own. They were all connected by design. The angels of time stood quietly behind it all, and it was this smooth rhythm that made the earth thrive. They were everywhere, but they were calm. Their job was never ending, but it was full of respect. They kept the balance of years and ages in their hands, making sure that history happened as it was meant to. As Enoch's vision got better, he could see the stars more clearly. He saw the Great Bear, the clusters of the Pleiades, and the belt of Orion, each shining with a majesty he had never seen before. They weren't just shapes in the sky. They were signs of seasons and times. Each constellation appeared when it was most needed to guide the earth. Sailors, shepherds, and kings would one day look to these same stars for direction, but none of them would understand the spiritual hands that were guiding their light. Angels stood near these stars like guards. Their bodies were huge, their faces calm, and their voices were low as they sang over the movement of the heavens. He was then shown the big cycles of time that went on for much longer than one life. Ages came and went like waves on the shore, each one ruled by laws written down before the world was built. The stars moving showed these bigger rhythms, which marked the end of one era and the start of another. The constellations, like the sun and moon, marked the passing of time. To the angels, what seemed far away and hard to understand to people was a perfect part of the symphony of eternity. Enoch thought he saw a clock that didn't measure minutes but thousands of years. Its gears were made of light, and the Most High told its hands to move. The stars seemed to talk in this vision, and their light pulsed like voices singing. It wasn't language that Enoch knew, it was something deeper than words, a sign of obedience and purpose. Each star sang its own note, and together they made a harmony that brought peace to the heavens. The angels joined in, and their voices mixed with the light until it was impossible to tell the difference between the song and the flame. The sky didn't seem like a faraway void, it seemed like a place of order, where every shining point had a purpose. Enoch saw that time was not a burden or an enemy, but a carefully measured gift. Days, months, seasons, and years were not random events. They were gifts from God, each one carrying the weight of God's care. The rising and setting of lights, the changing of the seasons, and the rhythm of the stars all reminded me that creation was never left behind. The earth and the heavens moved together in harmony, and each turn of the cycle added another stroke to the design that would last forever. He felt his heart stop, and a sense of awe washed over him like a soft cloak. The stars moved in perfect harmony, and the seasons came and went without any problems. Everything was guided, everything was safe, and everything was peaceful. For Enoch, this vision was more than just knowledge, it was comfort. It gave him a deep sense of peace that the Creator was in charge of every moment, from the smallest flicker of a star to the grand turning of the ages. He felt the weight of time lift from him, not as something that was pressing down on him, but as something that was gently moving him forward, like a river flowing within the will of God. Enoch was taken into a vision where the air itself seemed to shake with stillness, as if all of creation had stopped to listen. Before him was a huge space that was neither earth nor heaven as he knew them. It was a place, between the two, ready for the revealing of mysteries beyond measure. There was no end to the horizon, which was lit by a pale light that didn't rise or set. Time felt thin here, like every moment was heavy with the weight of forever. He was shown the huge gathering of all nations, with countless souls stretching as far as he could see. They weren't standing in a messy way. They were all in a quiet order, waiting as if they were in a deep respect that words couldn't describe. Above them, thrones of shining light appeared, resting on crystal bases high up. These weren't just regular seats. They were places of judgment for the holy ones, who were chosen to make decisions with fairness and purity. The thrones were so bright that Enoch couldn't look at them because they reflected the glory of the one who sat above them all. He saw the throne of the Most High in the middle. Its light was soft and wrapped everyone who saw it in a calm that took away their fear. It was brighter than 1,000 suns. From this throne came rivers of fire and light that spread out like streams that separated the good from the bad. Enoch saw books opened in front of this throne, and each page shone with living light. These were the records of every soul, written down by angels who never slept or made mistakes. There was nothing hidden. These scrolls of eternity kept track of every action, word, and thought. The angels who carried these records stood quietly, their faces serious but kind. Their job was not to accuse, but to tell the truth as it was. Enoch felt the weight of memory rise in the air as the pages turned, as if the stories of all people were in the air. The righteous came before the throne with bright faces and light hearts. They didn't get to where they were because of their own strength, but because of the grace of the one who had kept them. Their robes shone like the morning light, and their voices mixed with the songs of angels. Enoch saw that they were welcomed with peace. Their names were called out with love, and their steps were guided into places of joy that had been waiting for them since the beginning of time. They weren't afraid. They were at peace, as if they had finally made it home after a long journey through the dark. But then Enoch was shown those who turned away, the ones who accepted violence and corruption on earth. Their faces showed sadness, and their voices were full of regret. They weren't made fun of or treated badly. Instead, the mood was serious and full of justice, not anger. But the separation was clear. The river of fire kept them from crossing into the light of peace. They were taken to dark places, not by force, but because the truth of what they had done led them there. Their cry was soft, like the sound of wind through bare branches, and it echoed across the wide space. It looked like the elements were giving testimony in the vision. The sun seemed to dim its brightness as if it were bowing to the throne. The moon stayed still in her cycle, keeping her silver glow to herself. The stars lined up in serious shapes, and their light made symbols that Enoch couldn't fully understand. The mountains shook, the seas calmed, and the winds stopped blowing. Everything in the world watched the final judgment. The universe seemed to know when all accounts were brought up, and everything was put back in order. Then Enoch saw a person whose light was like the sun at its highest point, but they were also gentle and calmed every heart that was beating too fast. This was the chosen one, the anointed one, standing next to the throne of the Most High. Enoch felt a great calm wash over him when he saw him. He had both majesty and kindness in his presence. He saw this one raise his hand, and the nations bowed down in respect. The chosen figure did not speak with thunder, but with a voice like still waters. His words wrapped around every soul and declared justice. He was the one who brought mercy and truth together, and he was the one who made the judgment both a moment of awe and a moment of peace. The angels walked among the people who had come together, guiding, comforting, and doing what had been ordered. Some led the faithful into gardens of light, where rivers flowed clear as crystal and trees bore fruit all the time. Others walked with those in the dark. They were stern but not mean, and they led them to the places that had been set up for them. The angels moved in an orderly way and with a quiet purpose. Even during judgment, there was no chaos, only the unfolding of a divine order that had been in place for a long time. Enoch saw that the good people shone brighter as they rested, their light mixing with the light of the heavens. Their laughter was soft, like rain falling softly, and their calmness filled the air. For them, time didn't mean hours or days anymore. It was all gone in eternity. The evil, on the other hand, got dimmer as they moved away. Their shadows grew longer, and their voices faded into silence. But even though they were apart, they still remembered the mercy they had turned down, which was a sign that the light had once reached for them. Then the vision got bigger, and Enoch could see the whole universe beyond the people who were there. He was shown the new heavens and the renewed earth, where righteousness would always be present. The land was green and fertile, and the water was clean and plentiful. The animals moved around without fear, and the air was always full of the smell of flowers. The sky above it all was clear of darkness, and the stars shone with happiness instead of seriousness. The throne of the Most High was still in the middle, and it radiated peace that reached every part of this new creation. Enoch was amazed and realized that this last judgment was not just about punishment or reward, but also about bringing back peace. It was the fixing of everything, the balancing of every scale, and the healing of every wound that had been opened in the long history of the world. What he saw wasn't fear, it was completion, like the last note of a song that fades away, leaving the heart both satisfied and still. He could still see the vision, and he could feel its peace sink into his soul, as if he had been pulled into the eternal peace of that moment. In the quiet of Enoch's visions, there is a voice that speaks not only to his time, but to all generations to come. This voice carries guidance, warnings, and hope like water through the ages. It is a voice that speaks softly but firmly, reminding people of their place in the vastness of creation and the duty that each person has. Enoch's lessons do not fade like the dust of forgotten stories. They are still alive and echo in the minds of those who take the time to listen. His message was not limited to a specific tribe, nation, or era. It was a universal exhortation for humanity to approach the Creator with reverence and to treat one another with kindness. Enoch saw that people have many choices to make, and each choice has an effect that lasts the rough time. His words remind us that even the smallest things can have a big impact on the eternal. A kind word, a hand reaching out to help, or telling the truth when it would be easier to lie. These are all things that are seen and remembered in heaven. Enoch's visions, on the other hand, show us that cruelty, injustice, and selfishness may seem to thrive for a time, but they always lead to emptiness and sadness. His message is one of responsibility, but not in a way that scares us. Instead, it wakes us up to live fully, knowing that every heartbeat and every thought is important in the grand scheme of things. During his journey through visions, Enoch saw both the destruction that would come to those who went against the divine order and the blessings that would come to those who were good. The difference is meant to be both a warning and a guide, telling people to think carefully about where they are going. He teaches that justice is not a temporary idea that is limited by earthly systems, but a living principle that is upheld by the very foundations of heaven. No bribe, lie, or power of this world can change the outcome of justice when the scales are even. People are invited to think about this truth and build a life based on fairness, humility, and compassion. When the time comes to face the music, their hearts will be light with integrity. Enoch's message, on the other hand, brings a lot of comfort along with the visions of judgment. He saw not only the problems and mistakes that people make, but also the forgiveness and mercy that come from God. His words remind us that no one is beyond redemption, and that even the darkest heart can be softened when it turns sincerely toward the light. This hope is what makes his message so important. People aren't left alone to fight their battles. Instead, they are guided with patience, given chances to come back, rebuild, and renew their promise to do good. The moral lessons that Enoch taught also stress getting along with nature. His visions of stars, seasons, and cosmic order serve as a reminder that people must live in harmony with the world around them. The heavens move exactly, the earth produces its fruits at the right times, and rivers carve their steady paths. People, too, are called to follow this rhythm instead of going against it without thinking. To exploit, to destroy without thought, or to live as though the world exists solely for consumption is to disrupt the balance. Enoch's voice encourages a gentler way of living, one where gratitude and stewardship replace greed and waste. Another idea that runs through his teachings is the strength of humility. Enoch, who was given visions of the heavens and the mysteries of time, was still a man who walked humbly with God. His example demonstrates that authentic greatness is rooted in humility, patience, and fidelity, rather than in arrogance or control. This is a call for people to stop being arrogant, to fight the idea that having power or money makes you valuable, and to remember that even the smallest acts of love are known in heaven. Being humble makes it easier to be wise, and being wise lets the heart hear the quiet truths that pride often drowns out. Enoch's message also reminds us of the importance of community. Humanity's journey is not characterized by isolated individuals, but by collective existence, wherein the actions of one influence the multitude. He talks about having a common goal and a sense of justice that includes everyone, even the stranger, the widow, the orphan, and the poor. Not caring about the pain of others means forgetting the things that connect all people. His call is for a caring society where mercy wins over apathy, where everyone is treated with respect, and where people see the divine breath that gives life in each other. There is also a warning in his prophetic voice against the temptation of forbidden knowledge and the pursuit of power that corrupts. People should remember to look for wisdom with respect, not pride, and remember that not all knowledge is meant for selfish purposes. Real wisdom lifts you up and heals you. Fake wisdom tears you down and keeps you in chains. This is a lesson that still applies today. The search for power and unchecked curiosity can lead to both amazing and dangerous things. Enoch's warning encourages discernment, urging the acceptance of knowledge that fosters growth and harmony, while denouncing avenues that propagate destruction. Hope is at the center of his message. Hope that people can overcome their flaws, and that even in the midst of chaos and trial, there is still a promise of restoration. His visions show a future where right is as bright as the sun, where sadness is gone, and where those who stay strong in their faith will find joy that never ends. This hope isn't far away or vague. It starts with the choices we make right now. Forgiving when wronged, staying honest when tempted, and loving when it would be easier to hate are all seeds of hope that are sown into the soil of everyday life. Enoch's teachings are like lanterns on a dark path that show the way forward. They talk about what will happen in the future and how people should live now. His message whispers of patience, reminding us that time belongs to the Creator and that we should not rush or force the unfolding of destiny. It encourages us to be mindful, to always be aware of how important each step we take is. It is, above all, a message of love. Love is the basis of justice, wisdom, and hope. It stretches from the heavens to the earth, bringing all of creation together in harmony. Enoch's return from the heavens to the earth was not like a normal trip for a man to walk from one place to another. It was as if the very fabric of heaven was with him, carrying the weight of visions that were too big to be measured and too bright to be forgotten. He came down not with pride, but with a serious gentleness, like someone who had been given treasures that could not be hidden or kept for himself. The air around him seemed to be still in a different way, as if heaven had touched the earth through him. His heart was full of awe and fear, knowing that he had been chosen to bring divine wisdom back to a world that was still struggling. He thought about the journey he had made through the heavens, where each level revealed deeper mysteries than the one before. He thought about how beautiful angelic choirs were, how well the lights in the sky worked together, and how the sun, moon, and stars followed a set order. He had been to the big rooms where justice is decided and where the cries of the innocent rise like incense before the throne. He had seen what happened to the rebellious angels. They were tied up in darkness as a warning of what happens when you go against the eternal order. As he got closer to the earth, these memories didn't fade. Instead, they got stronger and left marks on his soul that would last forever. Enoch knew that coming back meant more than just going back to the way things were on earth. He had a duty to carry with him a message that would change the lives of many people for years to come. His return was a link between the two worlds, the eternal and the temporary, the infinite and the fleeting. He knew that people who lived on earth, busy with their daily tasks and wants, often forgot the higher purpose that was written into their very being. His job was to gently remind them that life wasn't just a cycle of work and rest, but a journey towards something much bigger. Enoch could feel the difference in every breath as he walked on familiar ground again. Compared to the clear skies, the air was thick. Compared to the soft songs of angels, the sounds of people were loud. But there was also a beauty here that heaven itself loved. The sound of kids crying, families laughing, and fields rustling in the wind. He understood that the Creator loved the earth, even though it wasn't perfect, and that it was meant to be renewed. He felt better when he remembered that even the heavens he had seen were not far away from people, but were instead tied to them by purpose and promise. He often thought about the faces of the people he would talk to. How could he get across how big what he had seen was? How could words ever describe the beauty of divine light or the way his soul shook when he stood in the courts of eternity? Enoch knew he couldn't tell them everything he saw, but he could give them what was most important: hope, wisdom, and guidance. He could tell them that the Creator was always watching them, that their actions were written down in books they couldn't see, and that their choices would last forever. He sometimes thought back to how amazed he had been when he learned how everything in creation was kept in perfect order. The sun's path wasn't random, it was planned by law. They carefully measured the moon's phases to mark the seasons and times of year. The stars were like watchmen, keeping things in order in the vastness of the night sky. That kind of order showed more than just beauty. It showed that you could trust it. Just as the heavens moved in a steady way, so too were people called to live in a steady way, in line with the rhythm of God's will. This teaching was part of his burden and his gift. Enoch carried the weight of sadness along with the wisdom he had. He had seen the punishment that awaited those who turned away from righteousness, and he couldn't forget the cries of the souls who wanted justice. He knew that a lot of people would hear what he had to say and then turn away, choosing the things of this world over the call of eternity. He still decided to speak with patience and kindness, because his job was not to force but to guide, not to condemn but to wake up. The wisdom of heaven was like water. It could quench the thirsty, clean the tired, and feed the barren, but only if it was given freely. Enoch thought about his own humility as he looked back on his journey to heaven. He was chosen not because he was great, but because he was faithful. He was a man who walked closely with God, and that walk led to revelations that most people can't even imagine. This made him even more determined to stay humble, even though he knew things that most people couldn't even imagine. He didn't come back for glory. He came back to serve. He didn't come back to make himself look good. He came back to lift other people's eyes to the eternal. He often stopped to look at the stars, feeling as if the heavens were reminding him of what he was meant to do, not in words, but in soft feelings of peace, order, and hope. The whispers of angelic voices echoed in his heart. These times made him feel better because they showed him that even though he had fallen, he was never completely cut off from the divine presence. The trip back to Earth didn't end his visions. It was just the beginning. It was a chance to bring heavenly wisdom into everyday life. Enoch's words had the calm weight of forever when he spoke. He talked about justice not as something that was far away, but as something that was happening right now, even if it wasn't seen. He said that the Creator's mercy was and never-ending, and that anyone who wanted it could have it. He talked about the harmony he had seen in the skies and told people to show that same harmony in their lives by being kind, honest, and humble. His thoughts became a light for those who were lost, showing them the way without force. Enoch was changed forever by the trip back to Earth. He walked among people, but his spirit smelled like heaven. Every moment on Earth was a chance for him to think about the truths he had seen, and every meeting was a chance for him to share his knowledge. He didn't live apart from his people. He lived with them, but he always remembered the bright courts and angelic hosts that were with him. He was both a man of earth and a messenger of heaven. His journey took him beyond the stars and back with a heart full of divine wisdom. This was both his gift and his burden. Enoch didn't keep the visions he saw in the heavens to himself when he got back. He felt like he was carrying a huge weight of what he had seen, like a fire that couldn't be put out. He knew that the knowledge wasn't just for him. He brought his family together in the quiet of the night under the stars that twinkled like old witnesses. Their faces, which he knew well and loved, seemed to glow in the soft light of the fire. It was to them that he first began to talk about the wonders and mysteries that had been given to him. His voice didn't sound like a ruler's. It sounded like a father's, and someone who had been to places of light that no one else could see. He told them how the heavens worked, how the sun rose and set in its proper path, not by chance, but by God's will. He talked about how the moon danced steadily, changing shape with purpose, and how the stars stayed still like watchmen in the night sky. His kids listened with wide eyes, knowing that these weren't just stories of wonder, but lessons that would last forever. He told them to not only see the stars as faraway lights, but also as living reminders of faithfulness, order, and balance. He saw seeds being planted in their silent awe. These seeds could one day grow into lives shaped by devotion and wisdom. The older people in the community also came to hear him. They had always thought of Enoch as a humble and pure man, but now they could see that he had a deeper light in him. They paid close attention to him, and they saw reflections of the worlds he talked about in his eyes. He talked to them slowly and patiently because he knew that heavenly knowledge couldn't be poured into human hearts quickly. It had to settle down slowly, like dew on the ground, until it gave life. He said that the angels moved with such patience, never rushing, and always doing what the Creator wanted. He said that people should try to be as harmonious with each other as this. There were times when his voice got softer and the feelings of his journey came out. He remembered the sad cries of people who wanted justice, souls who had been hurt and were waiting for their freedom. His listeners could feel his pain as if it were their own, and during those quiet moments, they too wished for a world where justice flowed like a river. He gently reminded them that their choices mattered and that even the smallest act of kindness or cruelty was not forgotten but written down in heavenly books. They weren't scared by this lesson because his words were calm and sure. Instead, they felt like they were being led by a loving hand step by step toward the right path. His voice got sadder when he talked about the fallen angels, who were once bright beings but had lost their way. He didn't speak with anger, but with a quiet warning, telling his people to remember what pride and disobedience would cost them. The story of their corruption wasn't meant to scare people. It was meant to make them humble and remind them that greatness without obedience leads to destruction. His listeners nodded seriously, their hearts moved by the idea that even beings of light could fall if they didn't follow the Creator's will. It was a lesson for everyone to be faithful, no matter how normal their lives might seem. Enoch told his family about the reward that was promised to good people. He painted pictures of peace so deep that they seemed to come from his voice. He talked about places where sadness was gone, where light never dimmed, and where the faithful lived in joy forever. His words made them feel better and gave them hope that went beyond the problems of everyday life. The kids leaned in closer, their imaginations catching glimpses of paradise. The older people felt comfort in their tired years, knowing that their journey had meaning and their faith was not in vain. At those times, the line between heaven and earth seemed thin, and it felt like eternity was close by, too. Sometimes he would go quiet, not because he didn't have anything to say, but because the visions were too big for words. His family would sit quietly with him and watch the fire crackle. They knew that he couldn't always talk about the things that were bothering him. Even when he was quiet, his presence gave off something otherworldly, a sense of peace, weight, and the feeling that he brought a piece of heaven's calm with him. His kids learned to love the quiet times as much as his words because they felt like he were close to the unseen world. He often told stories about the visions themselves when he spoke again. He talked about the angelic watchers who kept an eye on the edges of creation to make sure that the seas didn't go too far, the stars stayed on their paths, and time moved in a way that was in line with God's plan. His listeners remembered that they too were called to keep watch, not over stars and seas, but over their hearts, families, and communities. He said that being faithful in small things was just as important as being faithful in big things. They could also show the order of heaven in the way they worked and took care of each other. Enoch's wife, who knew him better than anyone else, listened with a mix of amazement and worry. She knew how hard it was for him to follow his calling and how lonely it was to have visions that other people could barely understand. But she also saw the love in his eyes when he looked at their kids, and she knew that he didn't carry this burden with heaviness, but with love. He found strength in her support and saw a reflection of the truths he wanted to share in her quiet faith. Their home became a safe place where heavenly wisdom and earthly life came together and made each other stronger. As news spread through the neighborhood, more and more people came to see him. Some came with doubts, while others came looking for the truth. Enoch welcomed everyone, not as a prophet above them, but as a fellow traveler who had seen what was beyond the horizon. He told them that wisdom was not hidden away in the sky, but was available to anyone who asked for it with a humble heart. He told them to look at the world in a new way. He told them to see the faithfulness of the Creator in the rising sun, the promise of order in the stars, and the chance to live in harmony with both in their own lives. Enoch's sharing of heavenly knowledge turned from teaching to changing. His family and community thought they were part of a bigger story that went from earth to heaven and back again. They started to live more fully, being kind to each other, looking for justice, and being humble. Even though they couldn't see the visions themselves, they could see their own reflection in the peace and wisdom that Enoch gave off. And in this way, the knowledge he had didn't stay with him. It spread like light through the lives of those who heard and believed. Even when Enoch's voice stopped, his story didn't go away. People who had walked with him, sat with him, and listened to the calm rhythm of his words remembered his journey, his visions, and his wisdom. His kids didn't see his teachings as burdens, but as treasures that they kept safe in their hearts. They told their children what they had heard around small fires and in the cool shade of trees, using the same soft voice that Enoch had used. Every time they told the story, they felt like they were with him, even if they had never met him. This way, his legacy became more than just a memory. It became a living thread that ran through their lives. The older people talked a lot about how peaceful they felt when Enoch talked about the heavens. They told the kids that it wasn't just what he said that mattered, but also how he acted. His life was a quiet testimony of being in harmony with the Creator. He showed the wisdom he had been given in even the simplest things, like walking through the fields, stopping to bless the work of others, or looking up at the stars. People in the future were reminded that true greatness comes from being faithful, humble, and having a heart that never wavers. Kids who never met him grew up hearing about how he saw the sun, moon, and stars moving in their own paths. To them, the night sky was no longer a blank canvas. It was a storybook full of meaning. Every star that twinkled told a story of order, and every sunrise told a story of hope. They learned that looking up at the sky was a way to remember Enoch's journey, and that people were not forgotten, but were part of a larger plan. These kids grew up with eyes shaped by wonder, always knowing that their lives were part of something bigger than themselves. Families remembered Enoch's lessons about justice and mercy when they were unsure of what to do. When there were fights, people remembered what he said, that every choice was seen and recorded, that kindness echoed through time, and that cruelty brought sadness not only to the person who was hurt, but also to the person who acted unfairly. These lessons helped the community decide how to deal with their problems, how to care for the weak, and how to honor the ties between family and neighbors. Enoch's legacy was not only preserved in scrolls, but also in enduring practices that fostered peace. People who traveled and wandered through the area often heard of him. People told stories around campfires about the man who had walked with God and been taken up to see the heavens. Some people didn't believe the stories because they seemed too amazing, but others felt a stirring inside them. a desire to live with the same purity and closeness to God. People quietly told stories about him in different places, not as legends with exaggeration, but as stories of respect. Every retelling was like planting a seed, and even though not all of them grew, many of them took root in places you wouldn't expect. Many of the prophets who came after Enoch saw him as a source of hope and guidance. His life was remembered as proof that it was possible to be close to God, and that one person's life could be so in tune with heaven that the line between what is seen and what is not became thin. His visions of judgment and redemption made later generations walk carefully, live with honesty, and believe that righteousness would not be forgotten. People still spoke his name with quiet awe hundreds of years later, as if the memory of his journey had its own light. Telling his story became a family tradition. Parents talked quietly about how calm Enoch was, how devoted he was, and how peaceful he seemed to be. The kids listened with big eyes and often asked to hear the stories again, especially the ones about the angels, the mountains of heaven, and the throne that shone with light that couldn't be seen. These stories became a regular part of their bedtime routine, lulling them to sleep with dreams of stars and songs from the sky. The memory of Enoch became a lesson and a comfort, making people feel like they were being watched over by the same Creator who had once walked so closely with him. Over the years, the story of Enoch also helped people when they were scared. People remembered his visions of final judgment and the promise that wrong would not have the last word when storms shook the land or when injustice seemed to spread without check. These memories gave them the strength to get through tough times because they knew that their struggles were seen, their tears were remembered, and their faith was valued. His story made them remember that even on the darkest nights, the sun would rise again. People's views of their daily lives were also shaped by Enoch's legacy. His visions of order in the heavens made them want to find order in their homes, their fields, and their hearts. The changes in the seasons, which we used to take for granted, now reminded us of the rhythm of God. Planting and harvesting became ways to worship, meals became times to be thankful, and the end of each day became a reminder of how eternity was made. His influence lasted because of these kinds of things, as if his soft voice still whispered through the years. Even in faraway places, long after the people who knew him had died, pieces of his story lived on. Some people wrote down what he said, others passed it down through stories, and still others carved or drew symbols to try to remember even a little bit of what he had said. His legacy was never limited to a single location or group. It crossed borders and reached people who wanted to learn and people who wanted to believe. People from different cultures who heard his story seemed to find something in it that spoke to their own search for meaning. His story lived on, not just because of the power of his visions, but also because of how gentle his life was. People remembered him not only as a man who saw angels and thrones, but also as a father who spoke kindly, a neighbor who cared, and a servant of God whose faith never wavered. His legacy was both great and ordinary, a mix of heaven and earth. That combination was the most important part of his impact, that one could live on earth while carrying the light of heaven inside. So Enoch's journey became a part of history. It moved like a river, passing from one generation to the next, feeding those who drank from it and reminding them of the eternal truth that their lives were not small or forgotten. His story kept calling people to follow the path of faithfulness, humility, and hope. His footsteps were long gone from the ground, but he lived on in the hearts of those who remembered him. His quiet legacy continued to guide and inspire, whispering still of the realms beyond imagination and the closeness of the Creator who had walked with him. As Enoch's story slowly unfolds, the lessons he learned become part of time itself. His journey was not just about visions, it was also about truths that he had been given as a guardian of divine wisdom. Every step he took in the heavens and every revelation that was shown to him were not just for him, but for everyone who would come after him. His life was a bridge between the living and the dead, a reminder that the universe is not chaos but order, not silence but song, not emptiness but a living breath of purpose. The visions he saw were huge, but they were also gentle enough to touch the human soul with both awe and comfort. Enoch's lessons weren't written down on stone. They were carved into the very core of memory and faith. He saw that the universe was held together by cycles of justice and mercy so delicate that even the stars followed their paths. Creation seemed to have an eternal heart that beat with every beat, reminding him that nothing was forgotten and no action went unnoticed. The good were kept in the light, but the bad would not stay hidden. Enoch saw that true justice is not sudden judgment, but the steady unfolding of divine law written in both heaven and earth. Enoch understood that time was a lesson as he thought about what he had seen. The seasons changing, the stars moving around, and the ages rising and falling were all reminders that nothing stays the same. Deeds bear fruit in their own time, just like the earth does. There is always an answer for every shadow of wrongdoing, and no seed of goodness is ever wasted. Enoch saw time as both a gift and a test. It was not to be wasted, but to be embraced with respect, because within its flowing river were chances to choose, to repent, and to walk toward the light. The visions of judgment weren't meant to scare people. They were meant to give them hope. Enoch knew that justice wasn't punishment, but fixing things, not leaving people alone, but making things right. The fallen angels and corrupt kingdoms he saw in chains were not signs of hopelessness. They were signs of a universe being cleaned up. Every time someone was judged, there was also a promise of renewal, a promise that creation would not be ruined forever. This truth gave people a quiet strength. No matter how dark it got, light was always ready to rise. Enoch kept reminding people that life is precious not because of power or money, but because of the eternal spark that is in every soul. Angels walked in light that humans couldn't understand, but the Creator looked at the humble and faithful who walked the earth with the same love. The beauty of the heavens didn't make the small acts of kindness, the whispered prayers, or the struggles of those who wanted to do good any less important. It was in those little, secret choices that the eternal story was most strongly written, though. Enoch saw that his journey was not just about the beauty of the stars or the mysteries of the universe, but also about teaching people how to live with respect. He knew that knowledge wasn't given to people to make them proud, but to make them humble. It wasn't given to people to control, but to serve. The lessons he learned would last forever, because they were so simple. Walk in truth, respect the order of creation, believe in the justice that underlies existence, and never lose hope in the promise of renewal. He couldn't forget about the heavenly realms, which were like a smell that wouldn't go away. The light from the higher worlds was not meant to make him less human, but to make him more kind. He came back with eyes that saw the holy even in everyday things, like the dawn, the wind, and the laughter of children. He saw echoes of light hidden in the world of men in each of these. People learned and found comfort through Enoch's story. The angels, stars, and cycles were huge, but the main point was peace, that the universe is not empty, that divine justice holds everything, and that every soul is seen and remembered. His last thoughts smelled like eternity, and they told everyone who heard his story to take a deep breath and rest in the knowledge that life was not random, but a carefully planned design. His legacy stayed strong through the years, like a lamp on a hill. People who thought about what he said were drawn into stillness, a peaceful place where they could feel the pulse of creation. His lessons didn't go away. They kept going through time, reminding everyone who heard them that their life was also part of the larger song of order and justice. His journey through the heavens was a path that others could take inside themselves by having faith and thinking about it until their hearts were in tune with the eternal. Enoch's voice didn't roar. It whispered in the end. His last thoughts were not orders, but invitations, soft reminders to look up at the stars, to notice the seasons changing, to believe that justice is always there, and to live with kindness that spreads far beyond what is seen. His story stays with you like a soft, powerful lullaby from the cosmos, calming your restless heart and leading it to peace. In those everlasting lessons is the promise that no step is ever lost, no prayer is ever unheard, and no life is ever forgotten. This is because they are all gathered into the arms of the one who holds both the heavens and the earth,